Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. Today we have substituting for Lake Melville, MHA Trimper, we have Windsor Lake, MHA Hogan. Substituting for Mount Pearl North, MHA Stoyles, we have Conception Bay, East Bell Island, Minister Hutton. So we normally take a break about halfway through, about 10 minutes. Just a few reminders, please wave to identify yourself and wait for your tally lights to come on. Say your name and position each time. However, sometimes they have tendency to leave the lights on, so that's okay. Water coolers are back here. Please don't adjust the chairs. And so I'm going to ask the committee members and substitutes and the caucus employees to introduce themselves. Then I will ask the departmental reps to introduce themselves, starting with the minister. And then when we get in after the approval and we start, then the minister can do introduction remarks. Okay? All right, we'll start over here with MHA Did.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. A lovely Friday afternoon. It's Paul Din, member for Topsail Paradise and shadow critic for education.
Hi, I'm Darrell Hines. I'm the Director of Research and Legislative Affairs for the Opposition Office.
Jim Din, MHA for St. John's Centre.
Scott Fleming, researcher, NDP.
Jamie Corab, MHA, Waterford Valley.
Fred Hutton, MHA, Conception Bay, East Bell Island. Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure and Rural Economic Development.
Your light went off. John Hogan, MHA, Windsor Lake. Jack Norman, Government Member's Office.
Okay, Minister. Minister Howell.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Krista Howell, MHA for St. Barb Lansing Meadows, Minister of Education.
Judith Hearn, Deputy Minister.
Robin Hayes, Assistant Deputy Minister for Corporate Services.
Tracy Stamp, Departmental Controller.
Tanya Noserly, Assistant Deputy Minister, Post-Secondary Education.
Scott Linehan, Assistant Deputy Minister, K-12.
Hi, Terry Hall, Assistant Deputy Minister, Education Operations and Superintendent of Schools.
That light is lighting up.
Oh, wait.
Oh.
Yeah.
Lisa Baker-Worthman, Assistant Deputy Minister, Early Learning, Inclusion and Child Development.
Oh, yeah, it changed. Angela Sullivan. Angela Sullivan.
Angela Sullivan, Director of Communications.
Okay.
Game's on here.
Okay, so before we start, I'm just going to ask the committee, do you have the minutes from the last meeting? If there's no errors or omissions, I ask for someone to move the minutes. MHA Cora moved. All those against? Or I should say all those in favor? All those against? Carried. Okay, so we'll now proceed with the estimates review process. Once I ask the clerk to call the first subhead, then I'll move to the minister. So I ask the clerk to call the first subhead.
For the Department of Education, 1.1.01 to 1.2.01 inclusive, executive services.
Shall 1.1.01 to 1.2.01 inclusive executive services carry? Minister Howell.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. What a way to spend your Friday afternoon. Thank you very much for to our staff here who've done an awesome job keeping me in line and agreeing to show up on a Friday afternoon. So we've got a very extensive budget and a lot of good things, and I don't have a lot to say other than very appreciative of the support of the staff in the Department of Education who hold all things together and deal with me at the same time. So they've done an outstanding job again this year, and look forward to taking your questions.
Okay. MHA Din. MHA Paul Din.
Thank you. Din number 1.
Yes.
Thank you. So I just want to get, again, look, thank you for everyone for on a lovely Friday afternoon for being here, but where else would you rather be, than here? And I just want to start with the budget speech and looking at some items that were outlined in the budget speech. So I note in the speech that talked about increasing spaces for childcare. And we always hear the numbers of the spaces that are created. Do we have any estimates or any numbers on the spaces that are actually vacant?
In terms of not yet functional, or as if the place is not full because they didn't need to use all their space?
The latter it would be, yes.
I don't think so. I do believe that most of our sites are at capacity, but I will ask the ADM responsible if she can fact check me on that.
ADM Baker. ADM Baker.
Hello, ADM Baker Worthman. So yes, we have, we regularly check the homerooms and ensure that they're filled to capacity, and there has been no issues flagged for me around that.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm looking at the budget speech, and it says we have also taken progressive steps to support childcare needs of healthcare workers. And in recognition of that, there were sites that were developed. Now, I know in the last year's budget and last year's estimates, and I asked the question then as well, there were four locations that were looked upon to be open for those healthcare workers. St. John's, Corner Brook, Bonavista, and Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Wabush. There's several that noted. They were slated to be open in May past, and I think one was indicated because of construction. It was going to be September past. My question is, for those 4 or 5 sites that were noted in the last budget and the last estimates, are they open now?
Right now, we're still in the construction phase of some of those sites, but there are various sites across the province where we've been able to identify specific seats or allocate specific seats for healthcare providers. So they would get a priority seating for a certain amount of reserve seats in different childcare centres. It's my understanding that there was some hiccups with the operations or the construction of some of the healthcare sites here in the city, but still working to get those open and operational as quickly as possible. Sorry, I could hear I'm moving around back there. But again, I'll ask the ADM responsible to fact check me on that.
ADM Baker Worthman?
I don't think so.
That is accurate. We do have spaces that are allocated. So St. John's has opened the childcare service in St. Michael's as well in Goose Bay. So we have Goose Bay site where we have healthcare professionals prioritized, as well as in Lab West, actually. Correct.
So out of those, so it's 2 questions. Out of those, how many are at capacity? And secondly, out of the ones that are not quite open yet that were announced last year, what's the timeline on those?
ASAP.
Minister Howell?
As soon as possible on the timeline. It was situations beyond anybody's control that we couldn't have predicted some of the things that happened. So as soon as possible is the answer that we're given. And I'd like to say that they'll be open before the next school year, but again, the situation that we find ourselves in with procurement and construction in this time in the province.
So just along those lines as well, because you mentioned that the receipts were able to be made available for healthcare workers at other locations. And correct me if I'm wrong, because when this was brought in, it was under the premise that healthcare workers work odd hours, right? So how has that been accommodated with these other sites that have been able to take them in? Just confirm.
Most of the accommodations have been able to be made in home settings, so they've been able to juggle their hours. And in the sites that are operationalized, then yes, we've had some that were able to accommodate longer hours. Still a work in progress because we do know that there are overnight shifts for a lot of our healthcare providers. We're not there yet. We haven't got any operating overnight, but we're working to make sure that that's a reality in the new sites that we're opening.
So along those lines as well, because it's twofold when you look at dealing with our healthcare professionals, you also have to come up with the childcare workers to work those shifts as well. Mm-hmm. Do you perceive that to be a problem, or has there been a problem?
Right now, we're working with our partners at ACE and all to talk through these things to see if there's any anticipated or unintended consequences of pursuing that. But as far as I know, in the conversations that we've been having, they seem open to making it a reality.
Okay. Again, following along the budget speech here and looking at the investing in K-12, this year increasing teaching services by $20 million, rising to $44 million next year. This will result in additional 400 educators and learning assistants. I know last year there was an announcement of 104 full-time equivalents. So firstly, with last year's 104 full-time equivalents, were they all filled, and how many actual individuals were hired? Because
I think the 104 was student assistants you're referencing?
104 full-time equivalents, learning teacher assistants were in the budget last year.
Yeah, that was student assistants.
Yeah, okay.
And they were all hired, 104 of them, they were all hired. Or so whatever the equivalent was for that.
Okay, yeah. That's where I was going with that. So when I'm looking at this year, we're looking at $20 million, and we're looking at 400 positions, and I think you've commented on some breakout there. But can I get a breakout of those 400 educators and learning assistants? What are we looking at in what's going to be the makeup of that 400?
Yeah, the additional 400 will be on top of the commitment that we made last year for student assistance. We'll be continuing that again this year. And in addition to that, in the teaching services, we will add 245 teachers or guidance counselors or administrators, and 175 of those will be teaching and learning assistants.
Okay. And when I look at the budget, the $20 million and rising to 44 next year, so is that $20 million there to cover the 400 this year? And would I be correct in saying that?
I'll defer to the ADM of Corporate Services.
ADM Hayes.
Robin Hayes, ADM of Corporate Services. So the amount moves from 20 million to 44 next fiscal to account for the annualization of those positions. In 25-26, those positions won't start until September, until the new school year. So we're only capturing 7 months of the salary. Next year we'll account for the full 12 months for salary for those positions.
So the expectation is, and I understand what you're saying, the expectation is that you will be able to come up with 400 positions this year, whether it's 6 months, 7 months, or...
Yeah. Minister Howell?
Yes.
Perfect. Just continuing on with the budget here as well. We talk about, or the budget talks about healthy food during school and a commitment to expand the school food programming. And I know last year we talked about cafeterias in schools or designated cafeteria areas, with more than half schools not having a designated area. So when we talk about providing, and I agree with the healthy food process, no doubt about it, have we improved any of our schools in terms of cafeteria space or space where children can go and actually sit down and eat?
That's the intention of the commitment. The financial commitment is certainly to invest in space, in kitchen upgrades, in any of the schools that need that work to make sure that it's operationalized to run a school food program. Some of the money that is budgeted for that, along with some of the contributions from the federal commitment, will be utilized for that.
Thank you. And just continuing on with K-12, because we're introducing pre-K. And when I look at the charts and that, it talks about, use the term, and I stand to be corrected, that this site is operational. So operational can mean many things. It can mean it's open, or is it at full capacity, or where is it in the scheme of things? So out of the 30+ pre-K areas that were announced last year, how many of those are at capacity?
I don't have the number at capacity, but I do know that there were 162 spaces created in pre-K last year. And you and I would, I think, have the same definition of operational. Yeah. It certainly means to me that you can walk in the front door, it's appropriately staffed, it's appropriately equipped, and it is full with kids, or has the ability to be full. So I would hope that that's everybody's definition of operational, and that's what we're working towards when we say that. I will defer to the ADM to see if the numbers that are at capacity are available, and if not, we can get those for you.
And to your point about...
She'll answer you.
Oh, you're going to go, Lisa? Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Which one? Okay.
Always nice to hear from you, Lisa.
ADM Baker-Worthman.
Assistant Deputy Minister Baker-Worthman. So yes, they are operational and full to capacity as needed. So in some of those areas, they may be smaller communities who may not have filled the entire 18 to 20 seats. That's just based on the number of the children in the community. Yeah.
So in relation to that, when we talk capacity, and I've gone down through the different locations, the 30-odd, and looked at the demographics for preschool age children over the last couple of years, and doing, just a quick look at what would be projected in terms of the age group. And to be at capacity and knowing that you require an ECE in the classroom, and for any classroom over 20 you require another, and you also, one of those has to be a level 3. Have we experienced any issues around getting the right staff or qualified staff in these facilities? Because that may be a issue with getting to capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do recognize that there are challenges in some of the more rural parts of the province in recruiting ECEs. And that's why we've been able to partner with the YMCA, and we've offered an online program for ECEs in rural areas, or for those who wish to become ECEs, and there's very little cost associated with that for many of the folks in the most rural parts of the province. But yes, we would have experienced in some areas difficulty recruiting ECEs, and
so just related to recruitment of ECEs, and we know a lot of them left the profession, for numerous reasons, and I would hope some are coming back. Do we have any indication in terms of figures of how many who had left the profession have come back because of measures that have been taken?
I don't have a number of those who would have come back from who were previously ECEs, but I do have a number that have entered the workforce this year, and it's 790.
Okay, thank you. I got 4 seconds. I'll let.
Okay. The member's time has expired. The member for St. John's Centre.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the staff for being here this afternoon to answer the questions. Appreciate it, Minister. How many people are currently employed in the department, and how many positions are vacant?
So within the department, we have 531 people employed and 98 vacancies. And that's not if we include teachers who would be captured under the NL Schools branch. That number grows.
Member for St. John Center, could you just move your book back a bit so I can see your light to make sure?
Sure thing.
Thank you, appreciate that.
And so that's 98 within the department itself, correct?
Yes.
And would it be possible to have a breakdown of those vacancies?
Yes.
Thank you. Would it be possible also to have the numbers of teachers currently employed in the province, not necessarily the full-time equivalents, but the actual bodies, with a breakdown to region? And I'd certainly look at maybe even specialty and grade, but I'm more interested in, too, the number of, if it can be captured, the number of retired teachers who are currently substituting in the system, again by region. And when I'm looking for the actual bodies, I'm also looking for those that are part-time. They're not full units. They're either working at a half unit, 25%, 0.25, whatever else. That's why I'm looking for that breakdown. And more importantly, how many of those positions are unfilled? I was at one school this week where one position's been unfilled since October. That's within the metro region. So those are the numbers I'm looking for, if I could. And whether you have them now or send them over later, it'll be fine.
Yeah, I do have them. There are 5,473 bodies, teachers associated with the system, 946 student assistants, 262 school secretaries, for a total employment of 7,212. And there is an additional list for substitutes for each of those three categories. And we can certainly provide you with the breakdown per region of what you're looking for there. I do have that information as well.
Excellent. And the 5,473, is that just make sure that's not full-time equivalent, that's the actual number, that captures teachers who have a teaching full-time, and those that may be at a 0.75, 0.25, 0.5 position, correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. How is work advancing on the education accord, and when can we expect it to be made public?
Very soon.
Very soon.
We've actually, it's going through the final stages of design and preparation for public distribution right now. I've had a chance to chat with the co-chairs and see where their heads were and what the final product should look like. And very encouraged to see that a lot of the things that are reflected in the Education Accord are already been actioned in a lot of it in this budget. And it's conversations that we've been having for quite some time. And we now actually have a roadmap that gets us to where we feel we need to be.
Thank you. Can we have an update on the work of the Provincial Advisory Council on Education?
Yeah. Right now, we're still finalizing the members for that. We put a call out to the school councils to appoint their representatives, and I expect that'll also be in short order.
And this will replace the Newfoundland and Labrador Federation of School Councils?
Yes.
Will this council have the same ability as the Federation to publicly advocate on education? In other words, right now this committee advises you. I would assume that the Minister of Education then is the spokesperson for that committee?
Yes, and we have a great working relationship with the Federation of Schools, and we've been collaborative back and forth on many issues, and we anticipate that that's the way the PACE committee will unfold as well, and expecting to see some of the same faces show up in that conversation as well. And they always have an open line directly to the minister, so that's certainly something that we're interested in maintaining.
Will the council then have the ability, if it provides advice to the minister and the minister or the department choose not to follow that advice, will they have the ability then to go public and very clearly state where they stand on a particular issue? or are they bound by a duty of fidelity to the minister?
Well, I do believe that the general consensus, there would be a general consensus between the department and the advisory council on many of the issues, and in the event that there's something that we can't work through, then I certainly believe there will be an avenue that we can discuss that, and always want to hear the feedback of the schools and the communities and the folks on the ground, so we'll definitely be willing to have those conversations.
So I'm seeking clarity then. Will they, if the Federation would be, it would be, right now currently, it certainly would be, it's independent, it would be able to issue its own press releases, make its own statements. I'm just wondering then, are you saying that they would still have the ability, that the PACE would still have the ability to do what the Federation currently does? They're collaborative, but at the same time, they're very much able to speak on their own without going through whatever channels that they feel at that point that it's need to do so. Would they have that freedom and authority, or that ability to do so, in other words, to publicly advocate?
Well, I would hope that there's a way that we could reach a consensus before it came to that point, and there'll certainly be a method in place by which we have to exhaust all possible avenues of reaching a collective decision before that happens, but there would certainly be, I can't stop people from speaking their mind, and if that is to be the case, then I've always been very open and clear that I want to hear if something is going wrong. I don't ever want teachers, families, or students to feel like they can't speak about issues that are happening, and this council would be no different.
So I'm still no clearer, but that's fair enough. But it sounds like right now and I guess this is what I'm trying to get at, because to me it sounds like what's happened in some ways that voice of parents has been publicly muzzled. That would be my fear, that the Federation of School Councils is able. It's an autonomous body that can operate on its own. It can give advice, but it can also issue its own comments on whether the changes in curriculum and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm looking for, and I'm not. You haven't given me a clear yes or no, but it seems we're hoping we would not go through that. So I'm not sure what that means, but that's fair enough. I'll have follow-up questions.
Well, I'll answer that in that, the expectation is never that a professional advisory council is out ranting and roaring against the group that they are advising to. So we would hope that there is a professional ability to reach some type of consensus, but in the event that that can't happen, then I do want to know if there's an issue that hasn't been resolved, or if there's something that's happening in our system that doesn't meet the needs of students.
Thank you. Given the recent cyber attack at Power School, is the department doing an evaluation of other software it currently uses for vulnerabilities and developing strategies to improve cybersecurity?
Yeah, we've been working with our partners in the OCIO on the Power School issue, and as we move forward and as we've amalgamated the school district into the department, the IT requirements are something that we've been very keen to monitor and continue to watch, and it's always on our radar. Cybersecurity is a huge issue for everybody right now, and will continue to be a priority in the department.
Thank you, Speaker. Schools have been told that desktops that can't support Windows 11 will no longer be supported by Windows security updates of October this year. So I'm trying to figure out, and I guess from what I gather, it's either, I'm not sure if it's now left to the schools to replace these devices, which represents a significant outlay of cash. I'm just wondering what is the plan to help schools replace the devices in light of this cyber attack, replace these devices that are no longer going to be supported by Windows security.
Well, we're very pleased to see an infusion in this budget of $5 million for IT and tech support, and I'm sure there'll be an allocation of that for upgrades to any existing software that needs to happen, as well as additional allocation of resources and staff to actually follow up on some of these things, because we know that we have heard that there are devices that remain in repair state for a little too long because the support wasn't there to get it back on track. But to speak to the specifics of the Windows issue, I'll defer to the ADM of NL Schools.
Terry Hall.
Hi, Terry Hall, ADM Education Operations. We're actually still working with Microsoft to extend the life. They've been working on a solution to be able to extend the use, which gives us the opportunity to utilize some of the budget, as Minister Howell said, to start to support schools to replenish their devices, and so they're not left without any devices for the students.
Okay, the member's time has expired. The member for Topsail Paradise.
You were going to say Cartwright.
No.
Thank you. Just to follow up, continuing on that issue, and I don't think we're going to be here 5 hours because we seem to be hitting everyone's list here, so that's all good. Because in the budget document, it talked about, we navigate the increasingly digital world, and to facilitate this initiative, they're put, as the Minister mentioned, $5 million towards additional technology services and related infrastructure. I don't know if that's enough. And I say that because of my own participation on school councils. And I know how much school councils and parents put in every year, raising money to purchase IT equipment for their schools. Tremendous amount of time and effort. And I know the cost that it takes, and decisions that are made. Do we staple our tickets, or do we not do that because we can save money to get another half a laptop? And those are true discussions that happen. So my question here, on talking about the IT and the $5 million, do you expect there to be a time when parents and students and school council will not have to be out raising money for infrastructure and devices that should be provided?
That is absolutely our intention. To be clear and honest, it burns me to my soul when I hear that fundraisers for schools are going to pay for technology or infrastructure in schools. So that was the reason why we started down this road of submitting a budget submission and a budget ask, and we will continue down that road. Right now, we have a commitment of $5 million for this year, growing to $10 million next year. And to your point, this is expensive stuff. So we'll continue to advocate for a increasing budget, because the needs are going to increase. New students coming in, new technologies, access and continued online learning, and the development of AI and the world in which we live. It is going to require additional resources. So for right now, we've got a 2-year plan, but we're working on what that looks like beyond those 2 years.
So related to that, I think it was touched on. So what is the expectation that this $5 million will address in terms of numbers of schools, or how many schools will benefit from this $5 million?
I can't say right up front, because we don't know what we don't know. If there's a drastic device malfunction or something of that nature, but we're hoping that this money will get us additional access to Wi-Fi in some schools, additional resources, additional devices to replace some of the devices that have been aged out, or to provide additional staff to look at these devices so that they're not out of service for extended periods of time.
So with any budget preparation, I mean, when you can't just throw $5 million here, $10 million here. There would have been certain lenses put on this dollar amount. So I would expect there should be some indication of what was intended in this $5 million in terms of we need this many of this or this many of that. And that's based on what I'm asking. I'm trying to get a sense of what kind of effect will this $5 million have? Will it be a little chip in the iceberg, or will it be roll the iceberg over? I don't know. And that's what I'm getting at. And I think when you prepare for budgets, that information is usually provided when you put a dollar figure forward. And I'm just curious as to what was the case put forward for this $5 million.
Oh, absolutely. And we work closely with our IT specialists and our colleagues in OCIO to determine what the need may look like, and built a plan that landed us on our budget ask this year.
So there's nothing that you can provide that tells me where that $5 million is intended to go, 1 million here, 2 million here, 3 here?
We can get that for you.
Okay, okay. I can't believe I skipped this. I didn't go back to this, but talking about new schools, and in particular, the 4 that were mentioned, I think in last year's budget. It spoke to, and I stand to be correct, I think 147 million was noted last year for new schools or renovations to one. This year, there's 50 million allocated. It might be 50, it might be a little bit more than 50, but it's around that number. Is that new money, or is that part of the, because I think the 147 was noted as over a year or two. Is that new money on top of that 147, or is it part of that 147? Is it just the same money announced again?
Well, the specific breakdown of that would be in the Department of Transportation Infrastructure, but for my own purposes, I know that schools that have been announced and budgeted for, we move on from them, and they're already baked into a budget years out, so we wouldn't have to account for money that would be spent if the school's already announced and we've moved through a specific stage.
So the 147 million that was announced last year is already accounted for. Am I correct in saying that?
I would have to defer you to the Department of TI to be clear on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the additional 50 for this year, I say additional, it may not. That's what I'm trying to determine. If that's new on top of that 147, or if it's part of that 147.
Again, I'll have to defer you to TI, but it's my understanding that what has been announced has already been baked in past certain stages. In out years, we wouldn't have to account for that.
Because you have Paradise, you have Kenmount Terrace, Cartwright, and Portugal Cove St. Phillips. And it's only last month, I guess, was the shovel went in the ground for Portugal Cove St. Phillips. There's not a shovel in the ground for Kenmount Terrace nor Paradise. And I can understand that. So if I'm looking at it, I'm just wondering, is the lion's share of this 50 million towards the Portugal Cove St. Phillips School construction? That's, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, and operational questions like that would have to come out of TI.
Out of TI, okay. So moving along, just looking at post-secondary. And you turn on the radio, you hear from everyone talking about post-secondary, good, bad, and the other. And I know back in 2017 when there were cutbacks on to the university, I believe Minister Byrne was the responsible minister at the time, and spoke at that time about greater transparency and all that was needed. So that's 8 years ago. I'm curious as when we allocate the 400 million or whatever it was this year, has government pursued being more actively involved in the budgeting or where that money goes, especially given the Auditor General's reports and given the state of mind of a lot of people out there? So have we taken steps to be more involved in and looking at more transparency of where, I say, our money goes, the public money goes into that institution? And I'm not arguing that it's needed to go in there. I'm arguing is what's the accountability there?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think the Auditor General's report gave everybody a good place to start where we can recognize some of the challenges and things that needed to change. Some of the things. There's more, of course, beyond what was just presented in that report. But I think through that process, we were able to have more of a guideline of things that they can move forward on, and I'm very confident that they're taking this report seriously. The accountability measures at MUN, I would say now, are to government are as good. They're they've increased because we do meet monthly with the president of the university as well as the chair of the Board of Regents to discuss the progress that's been made on some of these things. And they have been very public with the progress that they're making as well. They publicize all of their advancements and how they're moving through the report of the AG. They've also received a facilities management report now, and their intention is to move forward on that in the same fashion. And the AG herself has been clear that she'll be checking in to make sure that things are moving in the right direction. So I think that the measures around accountability have certainly tightened, and our relationship with the university, we've been able to strengthen it in terms of our collaboration together on working on issues that matter to the students, the faculty, the staff, and in the best interest of the people of the province.
Thank you.
Okay, the member's time has expired. The member for St. John's Centre.
Thank you, Chair. So, just to clarify, barring any that Microsoft is unable to extend the devices, what is the estimated cost? The estimated cost of replacing all desktops that can't support Windows 11 and will have to be replaced. What is the estimated cost? If you cannot extend them and these have to be replaced, I guess what I'm looking for, what is the estimated cost of doing so?
I don't have that information in front of me. We can, I'm sure it's built into the plan of our technology ask, and maybe the ADM for the NL Schools branch might have the information in front of them, but if not, we can get it for you. Pass it to the ADM.
ADM Hall, Terry Hall. ADM Hall.
Thank you, Terry Hall, ADM Education Operations. I don't have that number. I can't get it for you, but I just want to, make sure everyone remembers we provided all teachers with a laptop, and we do give all new teachers a laptop to reduce the reliance on the desktops that they had. And all 7 to 12 are issued Chromebooks. So new grade 7s coming in this year will be all issued Chromebooks. So we've worked over the last few years to reduce the reliance on school sets of devices, especially in that large group. And we continue to support schools where we can when they do need a new whiteboard or team board or something like that for the other technology.
Thank you. And again, I'm just looking at what's the replacement cost. Thank you. How is the department working with MON, an update on the department on how you're working with MON and the Board of Regents to find a replacement for Dr. Timmons?
Minister Howell. Minister Howell.
Thank you. So that's a process that's unfolding at the university, and I know that the Board of Regents is working through their selection process. They have a hybrid model that's in place, and it's my understanding that they are in the final stages of candidate selection.
Thank you. When amending the MON Act, Memorial Act, would it be possible to add an amendment somewhere that would enshrine the principle of collegial governance in legislation with regards to how the administration makes decisions?
When we open up the MON Act, we will definitely have conversations about what should and shouldn't be included, and it'll be important then to hear all perspectives and to make a solution, find a solution that works and that is always, as always, in the best interest of the students and the faculty and the staff.
Thank you. Just to the budget and the $20 million to increase teaching services, which adds more than 400 educators and learning assistants to the classroom. And this will grow to $44 million next year. And I believe that my colleague from Paradise, he gave him a breakdown there. But here's the question I have to ask. Is this actual new teachers, or is it basically to replace the teachers and units who were declared redundant this year?
I don't know that anybody was declared redundant in our system, but
If I may, I'll give an example.
The 400 will be for new hires.
So on this, as this principal told me, I had a conversation, called, and said on the day that the budget, that this budget announces, he lost 2 units in his school. A small reduction in the overall allocation, lost 2 units. He's a teaching principal. Teacher has a grade 5 class of 30. They have 1 TLA, which is basically in his class. The reading specialist, which was full-time, was then reduced to 50% and has other duties. So I guess the question he would ask then, and I would others, because he lost 2 units, will he get those back? And here's my point. Is this actual new teachers, or the fact that like on the same day, and I would assume he's not the only one, this school lost 2 teachers. They went elsewhere. So I'm trying to figure out if indeed, when we talk about the language about new teachers and units, are we just simply, it looks like we've made a step forward and 2 steps back. So I'm trying to get on, or are we just playing with numbers here? But for this school, it's an actual loss of teaching units, and it's going to have a severe impact on the success of the students there.
So I would say that in any instance where teachers were required, then they certainly wouldn't have been cut. And the 400 positions will be new hires, and there's a process that unfolds that determines what the most appropriate allocation of resource would be. And that specific instance, I'm not aware of it particularly, of all the specifics, but certainly would be interested to find out why that happened, and we'll ask the ADM responsible for school operations to add a bit more information.
ADM Hall?
Terry Hall, ADM Education Operations. Every year, a redundancy and replacement process unfolds. You know, it's a known process. It's clearly based on what the projected enrollment is for September compared to the teaching staff and the enrollment they had this year. And if based on that, there's a requirement for 1 less of a unit, that's the redundancy. However, I can tell you, I'm pretty certain, and I'll confirm it for you, that all of the redundancies that happened in this process before we start our recruitment were actually assigned to another school. And that's the way it works. So there's a replacement. And to Minister Howell's point, the announcement in the budget was an additional injection of $20 million that we will fill based on, you know, once we look at it. And you know, I understand you're saying the timing of when the budget was announced, but you know, the budget was announced. Now we have to determine the use of that $20 million and the best use of it.
Chair, in the words of in the words of this teacher and other teachers, simply basing it on a numbers model, a formula, which is what I've been railing against, is actually that's where the resources are going. So it's hard to take, and it's ironic that on the same day that new units are being announced, schools are losing units, and they're being moved elsewhere. But in a school where there are high needs as well, that's the point. So you know, it's great to announce this, but we're seeing that schools are losing units, and if it's based on numbers, well, fine. Then we're not talking about education. We're talking about budget. Simple as that. Okay, that's really what I need to know. If we read, I don't know if we were actually making improvements or not, but this teacher is frustrated.
So if I might respond to that, we've been clear that we're moving towards an allocation that looks at the needs of the classroom as opposed to simply a numbers base. But you have to give consideration to the numbers as well to determine how many students will be in any particular school. You do need to know the numbers. And on top of that, then you'd add an additional layer that would be responsive to some of the needs of the school, of the particular students in those numbers. And a lot of that you don't really know until you see who's in the class and how many students may actually be there that would require additional support. So initially building the plan, it's built on a numbers basis, but there's always an additional lens, an additional layer that gives account for specific needs or resources that may need to be placed in a school.
Thank you, Speaker. I'll end with this comment. This is the same government that brought us combined grades and increased class caps in the 2016 budget. So it's been strictly about numbers and budget. And I don't know when we're going to move to a point where it's going to look at the needs in the classroom. That's what the point here is. That it's not addressing needs. It's based on first on the numbers, and that's strictly what it was. But to make full-day kindergarten work, resources were taken from the rest of the system. And that's the part. So I'm hoping that when we move, that when we see this movement, that it's actually going to be reflective of the needs in the classroom, because this teacher, at least 12 have identified exceptionalities, and there are more to come. So I will tell you that the numbers system is not working. Anyway.
So if I might have a chance to respond to that, I'm going to respond to that, given that the research that has been done in this field does suggest that multi-grade classrooms are successful and that they do provide beneficial learning environments for their students. And that might not be the case for every individual class based on, again, the specific needs of a classroom. But when those decisions are made, they're made based on best evidence practice, and that would be why that was the case when we decided to do combined grades. And the addition of 400 staff into the system is in direct response to the increased needs in our classrooms. So if we didn't need the teachers, we certainly wouldn't be advocating for them in budget. So we recognize that the classrooms do need the additional supports, and we now have 400 new additional resources to place in them to address these issues.
The member for Topsail Paradise.
Perfect. Thank you. I just want to follow up on some of the initial question around the search for the university president. I'm surprised at the answer and question and response, but I can appreciate we're all busy. But of course, there was a new president put in place yesterday, so there is a president in place. And congratulations to her. But I do have a concern, and I have a question for government on this. Does government have any concern over the fact, because we did talk about transparency and we did talk about, more involvement, but does government have any concerns over the fact that the new president that was put in place yesterday was also part of the executive team during the time of the AG report, and also was part of the team when they removed the ode to Newfoundland? So are there any concerns from government in that respect?
So the president that's in place now is an interim president until the presidential search comes to completion. And in terms of the ode to Newfoundland, that was a decision that went through a significant process, and the Senate had high-level involvement in that. And congratulate them on their work and finding a solution to the question that was presented to them, and look forward to working with them on whatever solution, other things they may have identified that allows all students in the university to feel like they are represented, or that there's something meaningful for them in the convocation ceremonies. So a huge piece of work undertaken by that committee, so thank you very much to them. In terms of our concerns, we have made significant strides over the last 2 years working with the team at Memorial University. I do believe that they've done an excellent job of responding to what was a very difficult time in their history, and things that were largely beyond the control of many of the folks who worked there, and unfortunate events in some cases that led to publicity that was probably not warranted. But given the situation that they've had to deal with and significant turnover that's occurred at the university, we're confident that they're on a pathway in collaboration with the Department of Education to finding the new president at the end of their selection process and moving forward so that the university is the institution that we expect it to be here in our province, and we can build on it for the future so that we continue to educate high-quality graduates out of that university.
Thank you for that. And just in relation to the ode, and we all have our own views on that, and you know, I've heard from many. So an ad hoc committee was put in place. This committee met 35 times, plus other consultations. Do we have any, or does government have any indication of what that cost, what the cost was involved in removing the ode and then reinstating it?
I don't have that in front of me, but certainly we'll add it to the list of discussion items for our next meeting with the university.
Okay, appreciate that. So going back to my string before I stopped the last phase, we're talking about the transparency and the involvement in the university, and you mentioned about the last 2 years you've been more involved. A big piece, of course, that we're hearing on the news is around the deferred maintenance and the infrastructure. I mean, we've all seen the pictures. It's, you know, it's terrible. And look, we do hear that it's happening everywhere, and that's fine. But I'm concerned about here, and it's not something we didn't know was coming. So we got 480 odd million in deferred maintenance. There's 70 million over 8 years, I believe, that has been put in there to help on that, which really and truly is a drop in the bucket when it comes to dealing with that. So how, outside of that, how is government going to address the declining infrastructure in our post-secondary, well, in our one and only university, really?
So the university is responsible for its own deferred maintenance plan, and we've given them some very strict guidelines as to how we expect them to move forward. And what we would expect a university of that caliber to look like. Given the reality that they face, it's not something that's going to be accomplished overnight. It didn't get in a mess overnight, so it's not going to be fixed overnight. And we know that $70 million won't fix it all, but it's certainly intended to be a measure that's in place in the interim, given the fact that they've had such a turnover. There's been a lot of things happening at the university. They've had a couple difficult years, and we do acknowledge that. And now that we feel they're on a path to stabilizing things, this infusion of cash was, or this budget item was intended to support them through a period of transition while they now figure out what it is they want to do moving forward to manage their deferred maintenance and how they intend to fund that as part of their operational budget.
So related to that, when we're looking at the what they're doing, and you were saying you have closer eyes on that, what are the implications if they're not doing the right thing? And I ask that because when we saw the AG report, there was a lot of calls for change in management in the university, and lots of calls saying it was mismanaged and so on. So what role does government play when and if this university is not doing what they should be doing with the 400 million plus of our money to maintain a proper post-secondary university and gives the best education to our young adults? That's the problem with this, is the checks and balances. So what specifically is government doing to ensure that the money that's invested is utilized in the proper way?
You'll know when we get there, because I'll be very clear about it if the expectations are not met. I think, as I said before, it's they're at a transitional time, and we've had a really good working relationship with the leaders at Memorial University, and I think it's appropriate to give them time and a new president time, a fairly new board of regents chair as well. So I think it's important to give them time to get their footing and figure out what their plans look like as a university and as an organization. And in the event that they are not meeting our expectations, then as I said, we have our monthly check-ins where there are very clearly identified expectations and timelines on many of the things that are happening at the university. And they have thus far been able to meet most of the things that, to my satisfaction, to the department's satisfaction. So we'll continue to work on that relationship and give them the space they need in the interim to figure out what that looks like for them. But if that's not the case, as I said, you'll know.
Yeah, and related to that, I mean, that's good to know. I would like to see some reporting on that, some measures, timelines and deadlines and targets that have been met on that, you know, because that's what people want to see now, transparency. And no one argues that the university over there should have academic autonomy. I mean, I don't think there's an argument on that. But I think there is an argument about when it comes to the administration of it, when 70% of their revenue or is coming from government, you know, on that. So, I mean, we really need to be not waiting for the next Auditor General's report to come out, but looking for, you know, quarterly reports or something that tells us that there's a pathway and there's progress being made. Is there anything like that proposed?
Well, I get monthly reports on their status updates and what it is that they're doing. And they publicize those to the public as well. And they use the AG's report as their guideline. And that clearly identified the challenges and the timelines that she felt were expected to meet these things, and has offered or informed them that she will come back and make sure that the timelines and the expectations that she's identified are being met. So there, right now, we're using that as a template, and until that doesn't work for us, I think that's a process that we're willing to continue working with, given that the AG has clearly outlined what the expectations are and the timelines, and Memorial has largely been compliant.
Yeah, and I ask that because we hear from other previous AG reports where nothing was done, you know, and none of the recommendations were looked at and so on, for whatever reason. Yeah. But I think there's a greater lens and greater attention paid to it now, given the amount of money goes there. So, so that's my point, to ensure that there is some method or some process that we are keeping a close rein on what's happening there, given the latest reports.
And I would agree. It is a very significant investment of taxpayer dollars that the university must be accountable for. And I believe that the process we have in place right now is working for us. As a department, we are satisfied with their efforts to be accountable, to be transparent, and to move the dial on some of the issues that were identified.
Thank you.
The member's time has expired. I just want to confirm the member for St. John's Centre has no more questions for this subhead.
No.
Does the member for Topsail Paradise have any additional questions for this subhead?
If I can, I continue on. Just still on the university, and I'm looking at again, talking about the contribution that's been made, the investment that's been made, and talking about Faculty of Medicine. And in the budget document, in the budget speech, it talked about close to $7 million has been given to for more medical school seats, clerkships, expansions in internal medicine. So last year there was a contribution made to increase 10 additional seats. The budget document speaks to more medical school seats. I listened to the president or interim president in media this morning, and she indicated there's 10 seats. There's no more seats this year. I just want to confirm. So, is it the same 10 seats, or are there additional seats being put in the med school this year?
For the specifics, I'll defer you to the Department of Health because they're more familiar with the med school. It isn't managed by us as much as by them. But I do know that there are 84 seats at the medical school right now designated for Newfoundland and Labrador students, which is up from 67 seats, 66 seats just a few years ago. And I think there's an effort made in instances where seats that are designated for other students aren't utilized, then those would automatically go to Newfoundland and Labrador students as well. So, and there's also an increased emphasis on clerkships and residencies, which is where some of that funding may also be utilized. But for the exact specifics, I think the Department of Health can answer that question.
So still continuing post-secondary, it's actually a area near and dear to my heart. When I worked in the department looking at the Atlantic Vet College, trying to increase seats. We were trying to get it from 2 to 4 then. I think it's 3 right now. Stand to be corrected.
6, right?
I know my daughter had to go far and away to finish her veterinary degree. So you're talking about increasing those seats. What's it going to be increased to? Is it 6 or?
6.
It is 6 seats.
Yep.
And
so an increase of 3.
What's that?
6 in total, so an increase of 3.
Double of the 3. That's right. So so where are we getting those seats in the college? Are they additional seats in the college, or is there another province who are reneging on 3 seats? How are we coming about the additional 3 seats?
I'm uncertain of the process. I just know that we're paying for them. So I'll defer to the ADM of post-secondary to add any information to that.
ADM Noseworthy?
ADM, Tanya Noseworthy, post-secondary education. So those seats come out of an international allocation that the college has. Every year there are the seats that are purchased by the provinces plus an international. We have to give notice though, so that it'll be a year before it comes in play. But what they'll do is reduce the international seats and allow more for our province.
I appreciate that. That's where I was going with this, because the vet college only has so many seats, you know. But it's something I applaud. I know there's a huge shortage of veterinarians in this province, and to go for, and to get in there, you need a note from God. Yes. So I'm glad to see that. I'm just moving along to last year. There was funding provided to child care centers, okay, for 15 quality, inclusivity, diversity, equity, and accessibility coordinators to be hired throughout the province. I'm just wondering, what's the status of that? Do we have 15 hired, or are we lacking?
I'll ask the ADM responsible to answer that question.
ADM Baker Worthman?
Hello, yes. So we have 14 hired. One service actually didn't go ahead with it in the end, but we're getting a lot of really great results. So yes, we did hire them. Oh. Yeah. Well, the child care services, hired them.
That's a good news story. We never saw it in the media. Good on that. So just keeping with that, related, back in August past, there was an announcement that a newly developed position, student services teaching and learning assistants, will be introduced to K-12 schools this September. Has that happened, and how many?
Mr. Howell.
Is that you say student services teaching and learning assistants?
Yeah, I'm reading right from your press release.
We were able to implement 20 in this school year throughout the province in various locations, and continued commitment to work on that for the next school year and look at what schools might best utilize them. Okay.
I'm also looking at, well, this was a request now that was made just past January. I don't know what your deadline is. It's for the request for proposals to look at the certification process for early childhood. Has deadline passed on that? I'm not sure. You were it was announced a little while ago.
Lisa Baker Worthman.
ADM Baker Worthman.
Assistant Deputy Minister Lisa Baker Worthman. Yeah, we actually are just closing in on the RFP now in the next coming weeks. We just finished scoring, so we should have that started very, very soon.
Thank you. And going back, I apologize for jumping around and looking at different documents here, but you got the expertise over there and knowledge that can handle it.
They wrote the book.
Yeah. So just going back to the Paradise School. And when it was announced, the selection of the site selection, and Minister, you were noted in the media at that time saying it will accommodate all high school students in Paradise. And you also made a comment about it, and it would not affect the neighboring high schools in terms of programming. I just want to confirm, is that still the case?
I think what I said in the media was that the feeder school would be the intermediate school, but we've had some further discussions on that, and I don't think my statement may have been correct. So we're still trying to figure out if I'm right or not, but we're a work in progress. I do believe that I was incorrect, and that there will be additional students at that school, but to that end, every effort will be made to support the surrounding schools and maintain the programming in the schools that may or may not be affected.
Yes, and I asked that because, as you well know, and the member behind me, very anxious parents in terms of trying to see this school come through, you know. It's sat on a shelf for whatever, for 10 years, for whatever reasons.
You're welcome.
For whatever reasons, you know. And here we are. So every announcement, regardless how big or small it is, especially with regards to this school, creates a lot of anxiety or interest, and people want to know where, when, and how. And you know, every word we say is magnified. So I thank you for that. I'm just going to jump to, busing. So last budget, there was 30 million allocated to revitalizing the busing fleet. And I know the minister is behind me that may deal with that, but I know you have a close relationship, education, and infrastructure with this. I'm just curious as to, was that money spent, and what was it spent on, or how many buses, or what did we do with that?
Well, to your point, that's a question that's better suited for the Department of TI, but we were able to, our commitment in that was that we were able to reduce the 1.6 kilometer busing rule and ensure that students have a ride to and from their homes to school all across the province, eliminating one of the barriers that was identified as to why students may choose not to go to school, and very proud to say that that's no longer a reason in Newfoundland and Labrador, that students do have a ride to and from their homes to school.
Yeah, and you don't have to sell me on that. I rose in the House many times on that. So when we're talking about eliminating 1.6, which is, and I think is great, especially out in some of the areas where the pickup zones and that are not really conducive to having kids hanging around by the side of the road. So with that, and I know I've spoken with you before on this, and the other minister that would be responsible. When we look at these pick-up and drop-off zones, and yes, they're on a map, and yes, they show stops, and maybe it is done, but is there any move to go out and actually look at the physical drop-off pickup point? Because some of these drop-off pickup points, and there's not many, I mean, I'm only talking to my district right now that was brought out, but there are some where young kids, and I'm talking young kids, are on the side of a shoulder of a road that partially exists, and in the winters even more. Can we, moving forward, and this would not cost any much money, it's moving a pickup zone, but it's a real safety issue. In terms of preparing for next year, consider what the physical attributes of that pickup and drop-off zone are, because there are one or two I know up in my district that are terrible locations that parents have advocated on, and I'd hate to see something tragic happen there for the simple movement of a bus stop, right? So is there any consideration for?
Likewise, there are bus stops in my district that I just don't understand why it can't be moved up or down the hill. But that's my naive eye looking at it, and when somebody actually explains it to me, it makes a little more sense. You know, the turn radius or the line of sight from the hill, or all of those things that are considered. But we do endeavour to speak to those on the ground, because again, no disillusion here that I know everything about every road in every part of the province. My colleague in TI might have a better stake to that claim, but we're certainly working with the individual schools, with the principals and the administration at the schools to determine what would be appropriate or most appropriate. And if there's a solution that we can reach, then we're certainly willing to do that. But again, a conversation between the Department of TI is largely required there. And for what, there may be reasons that I don't even know of why they can't make that change, but in any instance where it's possible, then I certainly would support that.
Okay, the member's time has expired. I asked the member, does he have any additional questions for subhead 1?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. And, you know, I'm listening to the minister talk, and my wife always tells me how I hear this and hear that. So I'm hearing the minister behind me, TI, and them have a chat. And it's not lost on me. You know, when you look at these locations, there are issues that you got to look at. You know, sight lines, all that. I understand that. Double lane, triple lane, whatever. I understand that.
I don't have to worry about triple lanes in my district.
But my point being is we really need to truly look at, and I know you think of the best location, but sometimes the best location may not be the safest location, right? Absolutely. And looking at that, and I know I discussed with the minister as well, one drop off and possibility of picking up on a cul-de-sac, and we talked about measuring the distance of the cul-de-sac and all this. But my point is to ensure that going forward we do have and I'm not saying it's not done now, but when you listen to the parents and you look at the age of the kids that are being picked up is a determining factor as well, just for the safety point of that. Yeah. And related to that, where we eliminated the 1.6 kilometers requirement, we also have, what we've opened up is we have a lot of child care centers. Most child care centers are opening up close to schools. And I heard from many parents this year who had, okay, it was eliminated, and little Billy can go to school, but little Billy gets dropped off at ABC daycare. And for some reason, no, we can't drop you off, you got to be dropped off here. So a little bit of common sense, my father would say common sense is not so common, but a little bit of common sense there when you look at the drop-off zones and you can drop off multiple kids or pick them up at a child care center, to me makes more sense, right? And we're talking about working parents. We're talking about mainly women who are trying to get to work and they're held up because, you know, they got to wait at home for their child to be picked up, whereas they could be dropping them off to their child care center and picked up there and vice versa. So I do hope that, and I will say, there have been adjustments made. There have been adjustments made, no doubt about it. There's some child care centers that have embraced that, and I think the department have done it as well. But again, to go back to the issue of busing and that, it's those little things that are really big things for families that we need to be looking at. So there's no real question there. It's just saying, you know, something that should be considered, and I hope that that it'll be done as we go forward. And
it's always a consideration, and as you said, we work with centers on a case-by-case basis to see if there's a solution to that issue. But I mean, I'm sure you can appreciate that there may be times in the middle of a school year where a student no longer attends this child care center and now they're going somewhere else, or they've changed their mind and they don't want to go there, they're going to hockey. So it's fairly impossible to decipher where that child may end up at the end of the day. So it would be a fool's errand to try and accommodate everybody's after-school program or wherever they need to go or wherever they choose to go today, because we would not be able to tell you. But to your point, where there is a large degree of confidence that, yes, we know they're going to be leaving here, showing up here, we do make every effort to work with the child care centers to accommodate.
And I totally agree with you. The discussions I've had with parents, and I've had town halls on this, is that when you apply at the start of the year, here's Billie Jean lives at this address, but Junior is going to be picked up at this address and dropped off at this address. That's it. I totally understand. Oh, well, hang on now. Next week, it's going to hockey. No, I totally understand with that. But in terms of starting the school year, this is where any other adjustments becomes the responsibility of the parent. So there's a little tweaking that can happen there. I do also want to talk about hard of hearing. We talked about that last year, and we talked about getting, American Sign Language and that in some of these classrooms to accommodate children that are hard of hearing. Have we made any progress with that in terms of individuals who have, I know we talked about last year, and I don't know the number, but we talked about so many that would be available. Have we done anything to improve that?
So we have significant staffing to support the deaf and hard of hearing community, and right now we have 25 deaf and hard of hearing itinerant teachers who are working throughout the province. There's one educational audiologist, an audio-verbal therapist. There's 18 teaching and learning assistants who are associated with the DHH supports, and 14 student assistants who are using ASL. And we have 19 students of the 342 who would say ASL is their primary form of communication. So we're including as many as possible in weekly ASL classes and professional learning sessions to build the skill set that's required to meet the needs. And we also have 3 immersion classrooms, deaf and hard of hearing immersion classrooms, that allow students to follow this consistent educational path, and students from outside the city do get an opportunity to interact with those classes where possible. So continuing to build, by no means claim that we have reached the end goal. Certainly room for improvements, but we do believe that we've made some significant steps forward and will continue to do that.
Thank you. I want to go back to, again, last year at this time I was asking questions around the teacher recruitment and retention plan, which was a year late at that point in time. And the response at that last year was around, well, there was some more tweaking to do to it, and you were going back to the think tank and the NLTA to look at that. So that was this time last year. I'm just wondering, where are we? Is there now a teacher recruitment and retention plan?
There is a significant amount of money attached to recruitment and retention, as well as a ongoing conversation. And I would say the plan is it's a living document, because some of the things that we think may work didn't, or some of the things that might have come up in side conversations would be more lucrative or more successful. So I think the efforts that we've made over the last number of years to fill some of these hard to fill positions have given us some very strong answers in terms of what may and may not work. We've been very successful in hiring staff in the hard-to-fill positions, particularly in Labrador. And on the Northern Peninsula, I know I can speak for my district, that these measures have had significant impact. And again, not something that I think we can say we've got completely figured out or a definite answer as to what will and what will not work, but something that we continue to work on with our partners at the NLTA.
Okay. And I thought you might say it's coming in the education accord. I'm glad you didn't, because it's been something that's been going on for a while. Yeah. So with the education accord, of course, the announcement made last year had spoke to the accord being released December past. Now, it came out as an interim report, and it was supposed to then be the report last month, but I can appreciate, we're not counting days here. I can appreciate there's delays. With regard to the education accord, is there any money allotted in this year's budget that is there to address anything upcoming in the education accord?
So we've been very keen to work on some of the things that are coming out of the education accord before we got the education accord. And from most accounts, the things that are identified are things that have already, the wheels have already started to move on in our department. But in the event that there's something that we completely could not have foreseen or foreshadowed that they come up with, then there is a way to resource that. But looking at the broad strokes, and certainly in alignment with what was released in the interim report, we do believe that the efforts in the department capture that largely.
I'm almost to the end. Inclusivity, I just want to go back to that. And that's been a big, and we all know the importance of childcare in that. But we've had, I know I get calls on inclusivity with childcare, and parents saying, well, I can't go in the classroom because they don't have an inclusivity worker or someone to do that. And just like our schools, childcare has become more complex. What have we done, or what are we doing in terms, or what results can you give me in terms of numbers and that address inclusivity in childcare?
Well, I think we spoke to it earlier. We have the,
yeah, you touched on it.
The 15 itinerants that are the specialized workforce who are working on diversity and inclusion measures in our child care centres, or 14, sorry. We've additional funding that was allocated for centres that wished to participate in this, and we actually made it that you couldn't opt out of being a centre that accepted inclusion support. So we've placed an increased importance on that, and recognizing that there are so many challenges in the system right now, and we want to be able to capture up front many of these things, because the earlier they're identified, the earlier we can put supports in place, and then we have a benchmark or a head start on what may be needed when the child enters the K-12 system. So certainly made some improvements on the ability to assess up front, and I'm sure the ADM responsible can add some additional information to that.
ADM Baker-Worthman.
ADM Lisa Baker-Worthman, Assistant Deputy Minister for Early Learning, Inclusion and Child Development. Absolutely. So we have increased our inclusion supports over this last year. But a big piece of what we're actually doing is related to the Q IDEA coordinators and building out that concept of supporting the ECEs and supporting to do a mentoring model to help with how they can connect with the children and support them in the environment. The other thing that we've done this year is universal design for learning. So we've actually it was a significant lift in that we provided regulated services with resources around universal design, and so all of the classrooms have time timers, which are visual supports, as well as iPads for augmentative and alternative communications. And so what that actually does is allows for language and communication, and so this is something we're looking around for this next upcoming year around universal design as well. So,
good.
Thank you.
The member's time has expired. Does the member have additional questions for subhead 1? Yes.
I do. I'm close.
Paradise.
I'm close to the end. Thank you. Something that's been in the news of late, well, it's not of late. We've talked about violence in our schools, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. And can the minister give us an update on reported issues or instances of violence in the schools, and what additional measures have been put in place to address that? And I ask that more along the lines of, protocol for when a violent action happens in our school.
I don't have the updated number of instances in front of me, but that's something that we can work on. In terms of what we're doing to make a change or to make an improvement, we do have a safe and caring schools policy that we recognize needs to be updated. So we've made that a priority in the department to get a handle on what needs to change there and how we can put that in place to better support our teachers and administrators and staff, as well as protecting the safety of students and everybody involved. And that's a piece of work that's taken priority now, and we're looking forward to having feedback and conversation with our School Safety Coalition. There's several members of that committee who have a lot of information that they can add on how we can make a process that's more streamlined and more appropriate for protocols or whatever might be required in the event of a violent incident. But I think the biggest thing that we've been able to do over the last year that we've seen bear fruit or be successful was the implementation of our student service teaching and learning assistants. And the infusion of those individuals into our system has been a game changer in some schools. In particular, I think Corner Brook Intermediate, we had great conversation with them about what impact that had, what they feel was an appropriate measure to remediate anybody involved in an incident or support a teacher or staff who was involved. They have a very good plan that we're interested in hearing more about and building on as a measure to implement in all of our schools. But I think the biggest takeaway from it is that there's a relationship that has to be built with students, and allowing individuals to have these individuals in the school allows that to happen. It often allows them to be upfront and recognize when something is about to spiral out of control instead of being reactive or punitive after something happens. And that is one of the biggest takeaways from the last 20 TLAs that we've been able to introduce, and that's where our intention lies as we move forward, is to build a plan that revolves around intervention before it becomes an issue, so that teachers who, or TLAs who know these students, who can identify when somebody is having an off day or there might be the potential for a dysregulation, then they can intervene before it becomes a major blow up in a school or an issue that they can't get a handle on. So that's been, I can't talk about that enough, because we've seen how much change has come in many of our schools through that. But I would add that this is not an issue that we expect teachers, schools, or the Department of Education is going to be able to solve alone. When we look at violence in our schools, as I've said before, it's usually a reflection of where society has taken us, and it's going to take more than just teachers in classrooms to fix this problem. So we're looking at the whole spectrum of supports for students. If a student is hungry, then they're more likely to be hangry, which could lead to an incident that might have been avoided if we were able to provide a good lunch to that child in some of the most simple instances, we'll say. And if a child didn't have a place to sleep last night, then an additional support in the classroom may not be the solution that's going to fix that problem. So it's going to take a very multi-pronged approach to fix this, but the call is certainly out there to across departments, across all of our stakeholders, to work together to find a meaningful solution and just to be better, just be better.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that these these instances of violence are the result of many things outside. But I also have to recognize that it is our teachers and administrators who are the ones on the front line who have
bearing the brunt
to deal with it and bear the brunt. So, having more resources available to them is a plus. Having more facilities like quiet rooms is a plus. And this leads me to an incident that happened last year. Most were familiar where a young girl lost the tops of her fingers. And not being there, you can only go by what you hear and that. But coming out of instances like that, you do a checklist and you say, okay, what could we have done better, or if we could do anything at all? And I know, there's people out there who are the sight of blood, do that. But one thing that's come out of that has been the questions around first aid, right? Because of it being a work, and I stand to be corrected, because of being a workplace, there's so many individuals of the employed teachers, and that have to have first aid. I think that's the standard, and I stand to be corrected there. But when you're looking at dealing with a class or a school of 900 students. Maybe that's something we should be revisiting in terms of first aid for more than, you know, the employed crowd, right? So have you taken any measures or have you considered first aid being expanded in schools?
Yes, in progress. And given my particular background, I understand probably better than many how important first response would be in some instances where you don't have time to wait. Yeah. So that is certainly something that the department is looking at and will be coming forward with a plan in the very near future.
I'm down to two quick questions. The Waterford Hospital, the new Waterford Hospital, I don't know if it's going to be called that or whatever, but the new Waterford Hospital and the new hospital out in Corner Brook, do they have childcare centres in them? Just curiosity, you know, in this new world and healthcare professionals and that, do they have, were they equipped with healthcare, childcare centres?
I stand to be corrected, and again, I'll ask you to defer to TI for a more concrete answer, but I do believe that when the procurement was done for those, we weren't at the place we're at now in terms of the focus and the emphasis on our childcare centres. I do know that there's a commitment that any new centres that will be built under this recent mandate would have that, but I don't know for sure about the mental health and addiction centre or the Corner Brook Hospital.
Okay. And last but not least here, we went through the 8,600 books that were tossed out, costing about $200,000, and you know things happen. But so, what measures are in place to ensure that something like that doesn't happen again? I mean, I know we're all human. I understand, having worked with the department many years ago, that you would review curriculum, but how this happened is something else. But what measures are in place to ensure that something like this does not happen again?
There is a very concrete process in place now to be followed in the determination of appropriateness of our curriculum and our resources. And as you mentioned, this was a very unfortunate incident that happened, and as soon as we were aware that it was inappropriate, we made every effort to remove the resource from the school systems. And I think it's important to recognize that while there was there wasn't a process in place always, there is now, and this is going to ensure that this doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I now ask the clerk to recall the subhead.
1.1.01 to 1.2.01 inclusive, executive services.
Shall 1.1.01 to 1.2.01 inclusive executive services carry? All those in favor? All those against? Carried. We're now going to take a break until 2:50, I guess. Yeah. We'll restart at 2:50. Okay, we're going to restart. Just a note, we have a new system downstairs in the what? In the broadcast. And therefore, it's a touch screen, so sometimes the lights are a little bit delayed coming on. So that's why it's taking a bit of time after I continue to say your names. All right? So I'm going to ask the clerk to call the next subhead.
2.1.01 to 2.2.02 inclusive corporate services.
Shall 2.1.01 to 2.2.02 inclusive corporate services carry? The member for Topsail Paradise.
Thank you. I have one question. I'm looking at 2.1.03 and looking at purchase services, in which we see a $3 million increase. Can I get some accounting for that amount?
2.1.03.
Purchase services.
I don't think we got the same. 2.2.01 is additional funding to allow for 2% salary increases.
Just clarification, that's under purchase services, correct?
No, sorry. 2.1, say your number again, sorry.
2.1.03 purchase services, $3 million increase.
Right. That's additional funding related to the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Infrastructure Fund.
Okay, thank you. It's good.
No worries.
Okay. Member for St. John's Centre.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Under 2.1.01 administrative support, what is the current rate of chronic absenteeism in the school system, and how does that compare with previous years?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the member. Can you repeat the question?
Sure thing. I said, what is the current rate of chronic absenteeism in the school system, and how does it compare with previous years?
I don't have that information in front of me right now, but I will get it for the member.
Thank you. And how is the department addressing the 90 recommendations from the Teacher Allocation Review Committee, and is the department committing to implement these recommendations?
So, as I've said before, and when I get the chance to speak about it, I do believe that there has been a large amount of work done in the Department of Education over the past number of years with reports and recommendations. And the Education Accord is intended to amalgamate all of those reports, look at the most reasonable approach to meeting the requests and the recommendations, and building the 10-year road plan so that we can, the roadmap so that we can plan moving forward.
Thank you. With regards then to allocation, and just to make, if I look at here the teacher allocation model grades 4 to 6. 28, but I know, like in the school I referenced earlier, 30, and that's, again, that's not a class. That's a class that also has almost half.
I'm sorry, MHA, Dan, if you, can I get an earbud? I can't hear. No, I can't get no later. Now I got enough. I got it broke, Bobby.
Maybe we could pause the clock.
There. Take.
Only going to go longer. Thank you. I asked that because the example I referenced earlier, if I look at the allocation, it's based on numbers. It's grades 4 to 6 is 28 in a class, and that's strictly on numbers there. Yet this teacher, again, has who's a teaching principal, has 30 in this elementary class, and at least just about half actually, almost half who are diagnosed with have some learning disability. There are more to be assessed. So even with 28, I would say that it's a challenge. And I would suggest that there are probably more over the cap than anything else. I'm just wondering when teachers can expect some release from just the sheer numbers. And I know putting a TLA, as in this class, this class has a TLA, but it's still, when you look at the challenges in that class, it's significant. So I'm just wondering at what point, I know we've talked about it, when we can see these recommendations, at least to address the class composition and class size.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the intention of the additional resources that will be put into the system this year. We committed after the teachers' think tank to having a better view of what the class composition is and what some of the specific needs in each classroom would be. And that is definitely the intention of the additional resources that are infused this year, is to address some of those issues.
Thank you. And just as a personal story, I taught a basic English at the high school level, and I had large the academic classes as well. And in my basic English class, on a good day, when all of them showed up, was 15. That was the number in the class. And in that class, I had a learning resources teacher. We worked hand in glove. We co-taught. We worked on lesson plans together. We had a student assistant. And I can tell you that at the end of an hour class, I was more, after all the modeling, whatever measures I put in place, I was probably more exhausted at the end of that hour than I would be at the end of the 2 classes of academic English 3201. So it's a significant challenge. So even in I don't know what I would have done if I had 30 in the class, but I guess it's important to understand that with each student in the class, it means less time that teacher has to spend with that student, and that's why it's so important. With 2.2.01, are there any plans to provide the board with the funding to implement the service delivery standards as outlined in the Ernst Young's report? They estimate it would cost nearly $10 million.
So we're pleased to see an increase to the funding for the libraries this year, and continue to work with them on their operational plans, and certainly do look forward to hearing what it is they envision and how they can help move the mark on some of those issues, but definitely conversations that we will continue to have.
Thank you. And that's it.
Okay. Just want to confirm that the member for Topsail Paradise doesn't have any additional questions. I ask the clerk to recall the subhead.
2.1.01 to 2.2.02 inclusive corporate services.
Shall 2.1.01 to 2.2.02 inclusive corporate services carry? All those in favor? All those against? Carried. I ask the clerk to call the next subhead.
3.1.01 to 3.2.01 inclusive, early learning, inclusion, and child development.
3.1.01 to 3.2.01 inclusive, early learning, inclusion, and child development. Member for Topsail Paradise.
And I acknowledge Calvin downstairs. He got my light on well in advance. Well done. I have one question here. I'm looking at 3.1.01 and under 01 professional services. I see 2.8 million last year. You only spent 326,000 after, but now it's back up to 2.8 million. What's the explanation there?
Last year we had expenditures that were related to the first phase of the Early Learning Gateway that were covered by the OCIO, but moving forward we will be requiring the funds to do that.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. Member for St. John's Centre.
Thank you, Chair. Under 3.1.01, could you explain how the new parent resource kit program will operate, and will it be provided to all new parents or certain demographics? And how will you know you're targeting those demographics effectively?
The parent resource kits will be funded through, or funneled through our family resource centers. Am I correct in saying that? Yeah. And they'll be available to all parents. There's anybody who participates in our family resource center will have access to those kits.
Thank you. And what is the estimated cost of the new parent resource kit program?
$80,000 less than we anticipated.
And what did you anticipate?
I'll defer to the ADM for early learning, inclusion, and child development.
ADM Baker Worthman.
ADM, Early Learning, Inclusion and Child Development, Lisa Baker Worthman. So we are just finalizing the RFP on that, actually. So we do know that the RFP that was successful is much less, but we can't give it for until we finalize that contract.
Okay, thank you. I would assume you mean it's much less than what you anticipated then. Correct. Okay, then let me ask that question. What did you anticipate it to be?
Approximately 500,000.
Okay, thank you. How long is the wait list on the Early Learning Gateway, and how have these numbers changed since its launch last May?
Minister Howell.
The wait list would be dependent on the specific child care center, so some may have a longer list than others. But we have seen a significant reduction in the number of required spaces simply because now we have rostered the children. So instead of a child being placed on 10 different wait lists and giving the indication that we need 10 spaces or that we have 10 children requiring a space, we now know that there is one child requiring a space and they have indicated their preferences to what child care center they would like to be part of.
Thank you. This has sort of been touched on. A question we had here is, can you tell us the steps that have been taken to improving inclusion in early learning? And I know you mentioned mentoring, model, and so on and so forth. I'm just wondering what the challenges are that you're hearing from early childhood, I guess, centers and the challenges they're facing with inclusion. Is it, I would assume it's to do with violence as well, and maybe children who are still learning to self-regulate. But I'm just curious as to what kind of stats or what kind of reports you're getting from the centers and from early childhood educators, injuries, so on and so forth.
So I can speak anecdotally to what we hear. To have real documented numbers, we'll have to get back to you on that. But the challenges that we're hearing in our early learning and childcare spaces are very similar to what we're hearing in our early K to 12 years. Similar issues that are present in preschool or even before. And the resourcing of VCEs is also related to, we have to have an additional support in instances where those children would be in the child care centers. So continuing to work on how we best meet the needs of those kids, because as you mentioned, some of it may be self-regulation issues, some of it may be developmental issues, some of it may be above and beyond any of that. So this is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all, so we'd have to evaluate the specific child's needs.
Thank you. If possible, have an update on how the pre-kindergarten pilot is working, and are we still on track for full implementation by 2026? And what are the greatest challenges so far?
Well, since we've entered our pre-K agreements, we do have 162 spaces that are now operationalized. As I mentioned earlier, some of the challenges that we faced primarily revolve around our rural and remote centers. Finding the appropriate staff in some of those centers has been a challenge, but we've made some progress on that as well. And in working with our partners at the YMCA, been able to offer programming for individuals who would like to participate in that type of learning and may not have otherwise had the chance. But we are on target to achieve the goals that we've set out in the Canada-wide Early Learning Childcare Agreement.
If I may, with regards to that, I'm assuming then that the pre-K is probably, and for the most part, going to be tied to the community. One of the things we talk about tying it to schools. So I remember from my days as NLTA president visiting a lot of the schools on the Northern Peninsula. Concha, if I remember correctly, there were 11 students there in a school that was probably built for almost 300. So plenty of space. And I'm assuming, like a lot of schools are closed now, but I'm assuming then is the plan here in the remote areas then to attach them to the school or to have them in the community? And I would assume that if they're pre-K, then if there's any busing, then I guess that would be all part of it. And I understand the challenge of getting people at that point, but I'm assuming that you're going to use, rather than rent space or lease space, you're going to use the space available in schools, correct?
Yes, absolutely. That's a correct assumption. Where possible and where the sites are appropriate, we would wish to take advantage of sites that we already have access to.
Yeah, that would make sense. Thank you. How far along are you in implementing the Early Learning Action Plan?
I'll defer to the ADM for Early Learning, Inclusion, and Child Development.
ADM Baker-Worthman.
Lisa Baker-Worthman, Assistant Deputy Minister, Early Learning, Inclusion and Child Development. Yeah, we've completed our action plan for 2021 to 2023. We have all of the actions for 2023 completed as well from the Canada-wide agreement. We also have our provincial action plan, and we are all on track and have completed all of the actions to date in that one as well.
Thank you. So how many early childhood education students are there currently across the system? And how many do we need, I guess, to make in order to meet the demand?
I can't tell you how many are actually in the system right now, but we can certainly reach out to our post-secondary institutions and get those numbers. I do know that we have certified we have 7,222 certified ECEs in the province. 790 of those had entered the system in the last year, and 1,950 of them are on the wage grid.
Thank you. And where are we then with regards to, because talking to early childhood educators, love the job, it's the work conditions. A lot of them are end up leaving, going elsewhere because the money is not enough. But I'm just looking in terms of benefits, health and pension benefits and sick leave, things like that. That would make their lives significantly, or the work-life balance significantly more balanced.
So if I may, I'd like to return to the previous question because I do have the numbers of students who are enrolled. Right now we have 538 students enrolled in either certificate, diploma, or degree programming across 3 of our sites at the CNA, Academy Canada, and Kean. And in terms of working towards, well, it's always our goal to work towards more professionalized, more valued, and increased supports for the workforce. So to that end, we were very pleased to be able to support in the last year a number of interventions for supports for students to make access to the programming a little easier, as well as medical benefits that we were made available to the current licensed ECEs, and that includes life insurances, extended health care, which covers 80% of the prescription drugs, vision care, out-of-country emergency services, as well as employee assistance programming. So we believe that the program that the ECEs identified was the best one that they had chosen amongst those who submitted applications or plans that they investigated, and they've settled on a plan that's very meaningful for them. And we'll continue to work with them to build on how we can better support, professionalize the industry, and work with the licensees and the centres to make sure that they are treated appropriately in their workplace.
And I would assume then that the medical plan is not through the provincial plan, correct?
No.
And with regard to a pension plan, I would assume that if there's anything in the way of a pension plan, we're looking at a money purchase plan, such as an RRSP, something like that.
So many of the centres do have pension plans associated with them, so they would be that would be, within their purview to determine. And again, conversations that we are still having with the ECE workforce.
Okay.
I believe there were provisions in the last round of discussions that gave sick leave. I'll defer to the ADM.
ADM Baker Worthman.
Lisa Baker-Worthman, Assistant Deputy Minister, Early Learning, Inclusion and Child Development. Yeah, we've just recently increased the MERCs an additional 2%, which gives the employers the ability to provide more leave. In addition, we do have in our operating grant program now, we have our 2 weeks mandatory closure for the child care services for time off. We also have on our Early Learning Gateway a substitute list, which we have heard from the sector that they were looking for in terms of medical appointments and those types of things that we would need they would need someone to come in. So that is active right now and has been positively received by the sector.
Member's time has expired. I just want to check back with the member for Topsail Paradise to see if you have any questions. No? Member for St. John's Centre.
Just to make understand with regards to the sick leave that's available to them or leave. Is it paid fully, and how much? So when we're looking at the sick leave that's available to them, how much would that be? Is it standardized? Is it like six sick leave days in a run of a year and maybe family leave? I'm just trying to get an idea of the actual numbers.
I do believe that different centres may have different requirements, but I'll ask the ADM to comment if she has anything to add.
ADM Baker Worthman.
Lisa Baker-Worthman, Assistant Deputy Minister, Early Learning, Inclusion and Child Development. Yeah, so the centres themselves actually can use the MERCs for what they would need it. So there isn't any standardization across the whole sector because they are private employers who would make those determinations.
I guess I would encourage that maybe there be look for standardization and then put the appropriate funding, because it's kind of hard that if you go one section, one area, and we're getting sick leaves, the other one, no, we're not getting any, or 2 days here, 3 days here. I think you're asking people to work in anyone with children, and they are breeding grounds for disease. I know this from my own wife, who taught at the primary grade, because they want to be up in your face. So it's a special job. There's no two ways about it. So I think looking towards standardized sick leave and other personal leave, plus the other, I think would do some cases more to attract people and retain them than just their salary alone. Just just a thought, a recommendation. How many of the 6,000 affordable child care spaces are currently available, and how does government plan on closing the gap in the next year?
So right now we have close to 11,200 spaces that are operating at $10 a day or less here in the province, and continuing to work on what would have been our goals to reach 5,000. I can't remember off the top of my head. But we have a total of 2,378 spaces created in this agreement for children under the age of 6, and 1,032 spaces for school-age children, and 1,574 of those spaces have been created in the 24-25 year.
Thank you. Although an agreement for the funding of the $10 a day child care beyond 2026 was just signed, is there the potential that if a conservative government, federal government, comes in power, that they could decide to cancel it as part of their, I guess, cost-cutting measures?
So, sorry, if I could return to the previous question.
Yeah.
By the time I reach down through my notes, I find the answer. The target was 5,895 spaces that was set out in our plan from 21 to 25, and we have 3,419 spaces to be created by March 25. Right now we have 3,381 spaces identified in the current planning process.
Thank you.
And in terms of your second question, I think it's important to recognize that this is very good public policy, and I don't believe it's going to be something that's easily walked back at the $10 a day daycare, and I do believe that both parties have committed to looking at a version of this. That's not to say that it will be exactly what we've agreed upon already, but we've taken steps to try and figure out what that looks like in the event that this doesn't happen.
Thank you. 3.2.01, student support services. So the question here, I guess there's a few related to this, like what, one of the questions that we had originally has sort of been touched on, what changes have been made for students with special needs since the Churchill case, and what resources have been allocated. I think we've touched on that already. But I'll go on to something else. And this has to do with, again, student support services. And I'm looking at, in this case, violence in the schools. And I note that certainly we have the Safe and Caring Schools policy. But I also noticed that in the Education Accord, it talks about the reported levels of violence and bullying in schools, incidents requiring police intervention, and so on and so forth. I would say that this came out of, at the time, a teacher, a substitute teacher retired, and substitute teacher Michael Walsh had made it very clear in the media about the violence in the schools, something that I had, as a high school teacher, I wouldn't have witnessed as much as I would as to primary teachers, and which is where most of the problems seem to be. Certainly something I encountered as NLTA president at the time. Back at that time too, there was a school in the city where a teacher had had her jaw broken when a child slammed her with a full water bottle. Only last week, and this week actually, I was speaking to a teacher at another city school where a primary student who has well over 150 accounts on Power School basically threw a chair at a teacher. The teacher has ended up unable to speak for part of it, severely injured. I don't think they're back to work right now. Significant health. And so I'm looking here in terms of what's being done. And I'll ask it in this context. I don't know if you're aware of the, in New Brunswick, it's the grievance between the New Brunswick Teachers Federation and the government and the Department of Finance and Education, which talks about the inclusive education versus the right to safety. Because what I find when I was reading through this, so much of what's said in this can be applied to many of the cases that we have encountered here. In this case, the teachers who spoke to me said the staff are done with not being supported by the district. They are fed up, burnt out, injured, they're at their wits' end. The amount of being dedicated to a student is taking services away from others. Secure schools are a regular occurrence. Other students are mimicking the behavior. They're at their wits' end. And if you look at this this report, I will say this, it's interesting here, and it's important to read this because I'm more or less at the stage as what measures are you taking to protect the teachers in the school system before you end up with a case like this. But very clearly it says here, I'm satisfied that the employer could have taken additional steps to prevent or significantly reduce the frequency and intensity of harm suffered by the resource teacher and the principal. The arbiter ruled that under circumstances I conclude that the harm experienced significantly outweighs the societal value, and that's of inclusive education. Therefore, I believe that the harm suffered cannot be justified and certainly cannot be outweighed by the value derived from students' learning experience. Children are entitled to an education, and school employees deserve to work in a safe environment. In this, they are decided against the employer. because I'm looking here, everything is about keeping the student in the school system itself and not providing the necessary supports, and also here the belief that, or the feeling that teachers were being blamed for the situation. So I guess, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm looking, there are lessons here. What are the lessons here? Where are we going with regards to before, like since end of 2023? That's 3 examples that I'm personally aware of, and I'm sure there are more. So before someone and this teacher here was severely hurt. I don't know if she's going to be able to go back to her job. I brought up similar cases when I was NLT president. To me, I don't know what, like it seems here that that we've got inclusive education, perfect, but we're not, and as the New Brunswick Teachers Federation, is not the problem is not with the inclusive education, but how it's implemented and resourced. So I need to know, what are you going to do to make sure that teachers are not injured in this way? Because it's been ongoing long enough when there are several boards, when there is a large board, and now that when it's part of the Department of Education where we're supposed to find efficiencies. So I would like to know, what is the commitment to make sure that the teachers who you are asking to do this, to make the inclusive education system work, what are you going to do to protect them?
So I think you bring up a very interesting and a very important point. It's the balance of students deserving an education versus, or balanced with, not versus, balanced with the safety of the employees. So I don't think we can say inclusion at all costs, because it's certainly not the intention to put any teachers in harm's way. That said, I don't know that there's a ability to recognize the challenges, but you can't predict how a lot of this will unfold. So that's why we're working closely with our partners at the NLTA and all stakeholders in this process to figure out what the most reasonable approach would be. And you know, we've got input from a lot of the groups that represent folks who may find themselves in having children in the school system that require the additional supports. We have input from teachers, we have input from the restorative justice principles, we have input from the RNC, we have input from teachers and students that are all building into how we look at a plan moving forward. And I can't tell you right now that we have all of the answers, but we're certainly committed to working towards safer environments for our students and our teachers. And I think by the addition of additional resources will allow us to do a better job at supporting the inclusion principles, and 400 teachers will make a difference on some of these issues. As I said before, I don't expect that it will be a cure-all pill, but it is going to take a concentrated effort on all parties to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a more serious incident. And to be clear, there's never a time when violence in our schools is acceptable, but there are times we do know that there's sometimes we definitely could have done better. And there's sometimes where you can have all the supports in place and you can have all of the right protocols, but it still might not lead to the most appropriate outcome. So it's those instances that cause us extra grief and take the time or extra concern and take the extra time to focus on what a right-sized solution would be for that particular case, because it's not a case of a blanket approach is going to solve everybody's issues. These are very specific cases with some very creative solutions required in order to support both students and teachers, and that's kind of the place we find ourselves now is having to take a one-off approach in many instances, and that was taxing when we didn't have, when we don't have the right supports. So we believe that an additional 400 resources will allow us to do better in that avenue.
Member's time has expired. Do we have additional questions? Member for St. John's Centre.
It took a human rights case to get the supports for Carter Churchill that he needed, despite many years of advocacy for those supports. That's what it took. And I sat through the testimony where basically the department say, well, we didn't know about it. The district was saying, well, we're under the clear assumption, don't ask because you're not getting it. You don't have the resources, so don't ask. That was very clearly laid out. What troubles me here is how eerily similar this case is to just the case here. I'm just wondering, is it going to take this kind of a case to get the action required? Because in this case, the teachers were awarded damages, significant. So I guess it's great. I'm hearing all this and how the 400 teachers and so on and so forth, but when you and we're not like any teacher goes in there, you don't know, it's something easy could happen out of the ordinary, but when you have a consistent behavior, well documented, and teachers get to the point where they feel they have been abandoned by the district, as the teacher says, they felt that basically they can't provide, their staff are done with it. They do not feel supported, and that's I think maybe there is more than just the teachers. It's about how the district and support service actually has that conversation in schools, or if they even take what the principals and the teachers are saying seriously, or if indeed the objective is to make inclusive education work regardless, because in the end, it's going to be, and none of these teachers, this is the amazing thing, not one teacher have I heard of blames the child. Not one. But they do blame the system, because in many cases they want to help their child, but they should not have to go to school and say, well, you need to wear body armor, or in this case, don't flinch. In the case of this court, this arbitration here. So I guess I want to take this time to stress just how important this is. I cannot, you need to look at, again, class size, and sometimes it's a 2-to-1 ratio. It's down to that level. And it may be, I hate to say, maybe there is some sort of alternate approach, but I never saw this level of violence at the high school. As a high school teacher. Never did. Most of the violence was students, let's go up to the parking lot and take it on. But most of this, I've never had to worry about a student assaulting me. Ever. Ever. But I think in the primary, we're talking about early childhood educators as well. It's the same thing. It's why I cannot stress the need that you've got to get a handle on this, or, because I did send a copy of this to the teacher, you're going to have a case like this here, maybe multiple. And I'll be the one there saying, I told you so. So I would like to see something, a constructive plan. So by the time we ask this next year, we can see that we've got all these violent issues dealt with.
Minister Howell.
And I hope that by this time next year we can have all these violence issues addressed, but I think that would be naive of me to say, because it is a much bigger issue than the school system is going to be able to fix in and of itself. So I think there are a number of things that we've been able to do that will help the situation, not the least of which is bringing the school district into government. And I think since we've integrated that part of the school system, we have a better line of communication. We do get the day-to-day updates on what's happening, and I know that the The ADM responsible is in constant communication with staff, directors of schools, and staff on the ground to hear the concerns and the issues. And as I said before, I don't want any teacher to ever think that they cannot bring forward their issue, because I've never been in those situations, so I do not pretend to understand what happens in the day-to-day operations of a classroom. But I do want to know what's happening and if there are ways that we can improve that. So certainly do feel that we've made some improvements in the lines of communications over the past little while, but do take your point that there may be ways that we can improve that. We have heard these stories, and our opportunity to chat, when the Premier and I had the opportunity to sit with the teachers on the teachers think tank, you could see how passionate they were about their jobs and how devastated they were when they felt like they weren't able to do them to the best of their abilities because of whatever the reason. So that was certainly made clear to us, and looking at solutions, of course, we want to work with the NLTA, because again, we can propose things, but making sure that it works on the front lines is certainly important. And I guess in some instances, I don't even know how you can reach a possible solution. In some of these cases, they seem to be so difficult, but our teachers are figuring it out, and they have the best information, and that's certainly what we want to hear, is the solutions that are being proposed by the folks who deal with this day in, day out. So if there's anything that you can take away from this last spiel, is that please, if there are issues, if teachers should not feel like their voices are stifled or that they don't have an avenue to bring forward concerns. And I don't ever want that to be the impression that comes from the department.
Minister, I believe you do know, and I think it's a positive thing because of your own profession as a nurse. Because I would assume, again, it's a profession where you're dealing with the care of those who are vulnerable and sick, and who may be vulnerable. So I know, I like to believe, and I do believe, that I'm speaking to someone who may not be in the teaching profession, but also very much understands the threat of that violence, often not intentional, right, but which nevertheless you're going to feel. Okay, so I need to stress that here in this, in how important it is to solve this problem. It's not a matter of excluding children, but making sure that we've got the so that the right to that inclusive education doesn't come at the expense of that personal safety, and that gives me some
agree.
Hope. Okay. Through your bone, I want you to make note of it. Anyway. EALs, where's the budget line for English as an additional language in here? Where can I find that?
That would be in the teaching services portion.
So how much has been teaching, so how much of that would be dedicated to English EALs?
I will defer to the ADM of Corporate Services.
Yep.
Robin Hayes, ADM of Corporate Services. So right now for the 25-26 school year, there are 86 units dedicated for English as an additional language.
And there's a dedicated budget then for software and things like this for travel as well?
Yes.
How much would that be?
It would be built into the overall services.
And is this, and I ask this because at the beginning of the year, a number of itinerants with the department and in schools have been told quite clearly that don't expect to do your job the way you've done it in the past. We weren't that when it came to the software, there wasn't going to be available. I know that after several letters, that by the time October came around, that we had. So I'm trying to get an idea to make sure that EALs are not that English as an additional language, especially where we've got an increasing newcomer population, and that's going to be given a priority. And I understand after that, after we wrote the letters, we had there are a number of people that were hired. So I'm just trying to get understand, make sure that this is going to be properly resourced.
And it's my understanding that the services that are required, the technology assistive devices and the staffing would all be captured in the allotments the general allotments.
Excellent, thank you. That's it, Chair.
Okay. All right. Okay, I ask the clerk to recall the subhead.
3.1.01 to 3.2.01 inclusive, early learning, inclusion, and child development.
Shall 3.1.01 to 3.2.01 inclusive, early learning, inclusion, and child development carry? All those in favor? All those against? Carried. I just want to let everyone know that 4:15 p.m. will mark the 3-hour mark. So I now ask the clerk to call the next subhead.
4.1.01 to 4.2.01 inclusive, kindergarten to grade 12 education.
Shall 4.1.01 to 4.2.01 inclusive, kindergarten to grade 12 education. Member for Topsail Paradise.
Thank you. And before I forget it, can I get a copy of your binder afterwards? Appreciate that. Thank you. I think it was asked earlier, but two things I'd like to request is the data on absenteeism, if we can get the last 3 years. 1 year means nothing.
Right, you got 9 compared to.
You got to have a trend. So the last 3 years on that would be nice to have. And I guess in relation to what my colleague spoke about when talking about school violence and teachers and what they put up with, can we also get the recent 3 years on teacher sick leave, absenteeism? Because I think that's an indicator as well to how they're dealing with us. So that's three things I'd like to have, and I thank you for that. One thing that was announced last year in the estimates, we talked about putting air purifiers and the like in the schools. And at that time, there was no data or no indication on how many are equipped, nor was there information on how many have had their air tested in these schools. Can you provide that information now?
So I was adamant when I left here last year that I wanted this answered. And apparently, I was informed that my line of thinking was incorrect, because you have to know what you're looking for. And it was explained to me very simply that you can't just go in and stick something up in the air and say, is the air good? You have to know what it is that you're testing for. So in any case where there is something to test for, then we can provide that information. But to simply go in and say, is the air good, that's not a measure that you could be successful in capturing. So if there's specific information or cases that you would like to hear, then let us know.
Well, I guess my question goes along with the air purification installation. It's put in there for a reason. It's purifying the air and purifying the air of something. So by the instance of putting it in there, you're putting it in there to take something out of the air. So that's why I asked the question. So the air purifiers going in these schools, are they doing the job they were put in to do?
And the answer would be, if they're tested for something specific to determine the presence or absence of, then you would know. But I guess I'll defer to the ADM of schools of school operations to provide a little more information to that.
ADM Hall.
Terry Hall, ADM Education Operations. And I won't step too far over the bounds of our colleagues in Department of Transportation Infrastructure, where our facility staff reside. But what I can say is, when we put these air purifiers in and made this large investment, at that time it was for a specific purpose of COVID, if you recall, right? And we were trying to make sure that we had these filters in there as we were starting to come back into the school environment after COVID. So it wasn't necessarily that we thought that there was all big problems in our air quality and we had to use these. It was for a specific purpose, but then we left them, obviously, because any little thing helps. If it's cleaning dust particles out, anything that will help, because flus are flus, sniffles, it will help with all of that. So.
Thank you. So I've heard, inquiries, complaints, call them for what what they are, of schools that are, well, dusty, dirty, mold, all this. Would, or am I out of line, wouldn't air purifiers and the like help in that instance? And how many schools would that be helping in?
Well, certainly if there are instances of anybody identifying mold in their schools, then they need to let us know. And every effort is made to remedy that situation. Right now, I'm not aware of any on our radar that we've been informed of that have that particular problem. To your point about, some of the general upkeep and cleanliness in schools, that's something that we've been focused on as well. And even my colleague in the Department of TI and I have had that conversation about just general maintenance of our buildings. I mean, we want to see them regularly painted and updated and maintained. So there's efforts been made on that front as well. In some cases, we have some new schools that were just not taken care of, and they're not in as good a shape as some of the buildings that have existed long before. So we're making efforts to have pride of place in those buildings and ensure that they are appropriately maintained.
So in relation to one of the answers, talking about the air purifiers going in as a result of COVID, can I assume that every school has air purifiers?
I'll ask the ADM of Education Operations to answer.
ADM Hart.
Terry Hall, ADM Education Operations. Yes, at the time, we made sure every classroom and every common learning area, such as a library, had an air purifier. So we made a significant investment at the time for every school and every learning environment.
Thank you.
Yes, I apologize to ADM Hall. I called you ADM Hart.
Terry Hart. Where's the sunglasses?
Member for St. John's Centre, do you have additional questions?
Ms. Corey Hart.
On the first section?
We are in 4.1.
Yes, I still got more to do there, but just to follow up on the air purifier and the ventilation, I'm assuming, like, you go get a blood test, tick, 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 here are the ones you're testing for. So wouldn't it be appropriate then to be testing for things like whether it's mold? I don't know if it can be done that way, or CO2 levels, radon, so on and so forth, like a standard battery of things that you're looking at, even spot testing, because it's like, as opposed to, well, we need to tell us what we're looking for. There might be specific ones, but even as a preventative measure. I taught at Holy Heart, big windows, for the most part, you could open them up. Now they've gotten windows that aren't quite as open there, so you don't have that same ability. But a lot of the newer schools have HVAC systems. So obviously they're filtering out something. And as my colleague from Paradise would say, it seems to me a rather, I guess, prudent or proactive way to, like, okay, here are the things that we know. Too much CO2, people get drowsy, can affect their health, whatever. But at least, there are certain things that we test for. Would it not be appropriate then to have a program like that?
So I guess in some of these situations, these tests can be, I don't want to say false tests or negative or false negatives, but even something as simple as a sandwich that's left on the counter too long could give a reading that might cause mass panic or alarm. And, it's a situation where we don't want to add additional stress or pressures to folks in the school system for something as simple as a sandwich sitting on the desk. So in cases where we do believe that there are reasons to test, then we will absolutely test, but we haven't undertaken mass random testing of air quality in our schools. I'll defer to the ADM of Education Operations if there's any additional information.
ADM Hall.
Terry Hall, ADM Education Operations. No, Minister, at this time, I think you'd have it captured, and to get into the real details, we would have to work with our colleagues in Department of Transportation Infrastructure with the Facilities Division, who are well more versed than than me, at least, I'll admit. You know, but we work close and they advise us. So if there is something we could, you know, specific, then we know we go out and we'll test for a specific item if there's a concern.
Thank you. Is there any intent, I would like to know, will the district or the department be putting capacity orders or notices on classroom doors? I was at the university recently and they had, here's the total capacity of this room as a fire capacity. So I'm just wondering, when you consider that the number of classrooms, I would say there are quite a few that are probably over the capacity, safety capacity, but I'm just wondering if there's any intent, I think as a safety measure, OHS measure, to put notice what is the maximum capacity in the classroom.
I think our schools do have their max capacities, but the requirements in the gym versus the classroom would be different. So I'm not aware of identifiable caps on each classroom, but I do know that the building itself and fire code regulations would be upheld and maintained.
I would argue that that's not always the case. I know in my own case where that's basically how I had to resort to getting the class size reduced because it was over the fire capacity and safety. So what I'm saying, and it would depend too, I agree, in whether you have fixed seating or movable desk. Yeah. But that can be assessed at least, and here's the maximum capacity in this class of people, 25, 30, whatever it is, which is what they did in this in the classrooms in Memorial there. So it can be done. I'm just wondering, I think it would be prudent to do it here so we can at least people know that if they're actually teaching in a classroom that's within, not only within the the student-teacher allocation, but also one that is actually within the fire code as well. Yeah. So it's something I would like to see.
Certainly we'll take that away, and I do know that administrators make every effort to classes that they know are bigger classes, they assign a bigger space where it's possible, and every effort is made to provide adequate learning space, but certainly we'll take your point away.
Thank you. How are efforts coming along to roll out the anti-racist curriculum for secondary school students?
Can you repeat that question?
Yep. How are efforts coming along to roll out anti-racist curriculum for secondary school students?
I'll turn to the ADM for our K-12 branch.
ADM Linehan.
Scott Linehan, ADM K-12. So we have developed, Department of Education, a multicultural framework, and within that framework, with all our local partners, is addressing anti-racism. So with the work of that committee and with our consultant for anti-racism, all our new curricula and curriculum renewal is through the lens of anti-racism through our consultant.
Okay, thank you. And are there any new initiatives related to tolerance and acceptance education, especially given the rise of the anti-2S LGBTQIA plus hate?
So we're always in talks of how we can improve the environments in our schools, and as I referenced earlier, the Safe and Caring Schools policy will be a reflection of that. It's not just about physical buildings and space, it's also about how students are behaving and acting, the expectations within that space. So we'll certainly be including that as part of our review.
Thank you. Could we have an update on the activities and work done by the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee?
So the Indigenous Advisory Committee continues to be an important resource in the department. I know that just about every week I get a report of somewhere, some meeting or some adventure that they've been undertaking, and they continue to inform a lot of the decision-making process in the department as it relates to Indigenous education, making upgrades to our curriculum, and as we move forward on the path of truth and reconciliation. But I'll turn to the ADM for the K-12 branch if he has any additional information.
ADM Linehan.
Scott Linehan, ADM K-12. So as Minister said, the IEAC meets regularly. Our last meeting I personally attended as well, and that was in February, so they continue to be a large part of our curriculum renewal going forward.
Thank you. And related to that, I'm just curious as to how the textbooks for the French immersion, how they how did they get approved? Because they were introduced 1 year, and barely a year and a half later, it was an oops moment. There's information there that's not right. So they're not like they were 5 years old or 10 years old, but I'm just trying, like, a purchase at a significant cost, and then teachers are told to destroy for them. So obviously, when they went out, this information was known, but who was responsible for approving it, and where was the vetting process?
So I think we do have a very succinct process now that can be followed, and a policy that's in place to ensure that any resource is appropriate, and in terms of the investment, I think once we recognized there was a problem, it was immediate that we removed these books. We acted immediately to remove these resources from our schools, and I don't think there's a price tag attached with ensuring we're not continuing to perpetuate stereotypes or to do harm to our Indigenous communities. So that said, I do recognize that the path to truth and reconciliation is not likely going to be a straight line. There are going to be times when we may misstep, but it's never the intention to have a mistake of this nature. So when you know better, you do better is how I would like to think we're operating, and any time that we know something is inappropriate or inaccurate, then the same measure will apply. If it is wrong and if it is harming to Indigenous populations, we will remove it from our curriculum or our circulation.
I agree. My question is, though, how did they get out there in the first place? And who vetted them? It would indicate to me that no one looked through them the first look at it. In a year and a half or less than you find the mistakes. So I'm questioning, did anyone read them beforehand? Did they go through a process? Who signed off on it? Who made that decision? Yes, these are appropriate. So I agree with everything you said. I'm not denying it. But I'm trying to figure out, how did they get out there in the first place?
So I guess the important thing is that it doesn't happen again. And it does nobody any favors to try and place blame on who was responsible for it. The important thing is that we recognized it was inappropriate and removed it immediately. Recognizing that there was a fault in the process, that the process was faulty, and we have shored up the process and the policy now to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Member's time has expired. Does a member for St. John Centre have additional questions?
If the process was faulty, what exactly was faulty about the process, and what has changed exactly to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, the fault was that somehow resources containing information that was inaccurate made its way into our French school system, and that cannot happen again.
So any new curriculum that would have come in prior to this, or textbooks, and the decision to spend them, what would have happened? What would have been the problem? And I guess I'm trying to understand, because I learned from this mistake, but I'm not sure. I want to be confident, in fact, that the process has changed. So what was the process? What's the new process?
So we do have a process in place. I can't speak to what happened before this process. I'll turn to the ADM to add any additional information. But from my perspective, we do now have a check by check, step by step process in place to ensure that resources are vetted appropriately. And a large part of that will be making sure that our Indigenous Education Action Committee, Advisory Committee has a role to play. And I know that we've certainly stepped up their involvement in this process over the last little while, and will continue to do so because, as I said, we don't want this to happen again.
Could I have then the step-by-step process is what I'm asking.
ADM Linehan.
Scott Linehan, ADM K-12 Education. So step-by-step process. Unfortunately, on the vetting through the French side of the resources, a group of expert teachers come in and review the resources, and the next step would be to pass along to our Indigenous consultant and our multicultural consultants. But because they were in a second language, that step got dropped. However, when the resources were vetted on the English side, they went through the to these consultants who brought it to the IEC and immediately addressed it, and we responded accordingly.
Excellent. Thank you. That gives me some clarity. Appreciate that. And that's it for that section. Thank you.
Okay. I ask the clerk to recall the subhead.
4.1.01 to 4.2.01 inclusive, kindergarten to grade 12 education.
Shall 4.1.01 to 4.2.01 inclusive, kindergarten to grade 12 education carry? All those in favor? All those against? Carry. I ask the clerk to call the next subhead.
5.1.01 to 5.2.01 inclusive, education operations.
Shall 5.1.01 to 5.2.01 inclusive education operations? Member for Topsail Paradise.
Thank you. I'm looking at 5.1.01 and looking at increase, unbudgeted increase there that was there in 24-25 in salaries. Can we get an explanation of that? I think it was about an 8 million. No, how much was it? The bottom line, sorry, teaching services. It looks like about an $8 million increase.
Those were funding pressures due to additional units deployed for increased enrollment and increased substitute time.
Thank you for that. And moving along to 5.1.03, I'm looking at school services, and we're looking at a increase of $3.7 million for property furnishing and equipment. Can I get an explanation on that?
The vast majority of that refers to IT purchases for schools. During the school year, the biggest pressure was related to software licenses and subscriptions as opposed to hardware purchases, but the budget was transferred for these supplies.
Okay, thank you for that. And I know I touched on this earlier, 5.1.04 school food programs and the amount that's gone into that to increase that. And we talked about kitchen facilities, cafeterias. But I do have a question on who will provide that services. Are we looking at a private operator? Who provides the school food program?
In some instances, it may be a private operator. In other instances, it may be the school lunch program, the breakfast program, or some of the organizations that are already established in school food. But in other instances, there may be private businesses that would be required to meet the requirements in some of the areas that these other organizations don't operate in.
So with regards to the private, I assume there's an RFP goes out, they apply for that in different regions of the provinces. There's different suppliers. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That would be it for me.
Member for St. John's Centre.
Yes. With regards to under 5.1.01 teaching services and a question around shortages, I'm just looking at something that would have been unheard of when I was teaching here in town and even back 10. Is the predominance of a lot more of retired teachers. In some cases, teachers who are older than I am, in their 70s, who have gone back because they can't get teachers, substitute teachers, or a teacher who retired last year is now pretty well subbing full-time in the metro area because the position could not be filled. Okay, so I know there's money been put aside, extra money for the hiring, and we've the additional resources. So I'm trying to figure out where are they coming from, and I don't know. This goes back to my original question about the vacancies as well, because it indicates to me a significant problem here in finding I guess, qualified teachers who aren't retired. Not opposed to, not trying to say we should cut out the retired teachers. I think the system would collapse at this point in time. But I don't know how we're going to address that if we're going to have to find out why people aren't going into the profession, why they're not staying there. But it's a significant problem, right?
I would agree. Yeah. We do have a heavy reliance on our retired teachers, and looking at some of the numbers of teachers that are retiring. I think we're retiring 250 a year, where we're infusing 130 into the system of new teachers. So ongoing conversations with the NLTA, with the Faculty of Education, on how we can build that resource pool, and a lot of the recruitment retention efforts, some of the recruitment for the additional funding that's been provided, the new collective agreement, which sees us contribute almost $500 million right now to salaries and paying for teachers, which goes to $750 million by the time this collective agreement reaches fruition. That does help. We also want to work with the Faculty of Education on developing we're talking about a rural cohort. So even taking a class outside of the city where that programming has traditionally been offered may give other students an opportunity to enroll in the program. So there we can increase the number of teachers that are venturing into the system. But I think it's a collective effort on all parts to focus on the positive things that are part of this profession. And I know that the NLTA has done some great jobs with some of the communications, some of the commercials that they've put out talking about the impact that teachers have in people's lives, and how students speak so highly of their teachers, and promoting this profession in terms of the value that it adds to our society is paramount, and we have to continue to work on that with our stakeholders and with the NLTA.
Thank you. What would it cost to expand the school lunch program to the high school? Has there been a cost analysis done of that? And how much would you anticipate?
I don't have that number right now, but we can certainly look into that.
And would it be? I'm trying to understand why you wouldn't have, why the department wouldn't have extended that to the high school level. If you can't afford food at grade 9, you can't afford it in high school either. Unless that's all. I'm just thinking it would be beneficial there as well.
We would certainly take that point. I guess some of the consideration to the ability of students to leave school or not leave school for their lunch hour has played into that, and recognizing that a lot of the senior students would choose to leave, and whereas the younger ones can't, may be part of the equation, but it's certainly the intention to have it available over the course of time. We just had to start somewhere, and this is where we started.
You know, and high school students will leave, I agree, if they've got a car and if they've got money to eat out at the restaurant, but for the most part, there are a lot there who don't, and it's just, anyway, I understand where you're coming from, but I think it'd be worthwhile to move that into the high school as well.
Mm-hmm. Point taken.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Okay, I ask the clerk to recall the subhead.
5.1.01 to 5.2.01 inclusive, education operations.
Shall 5.1.01 to 5.2.01 inclusive education operations carry? All those in favor? All those against? Carried. I ask the clerk to call the next subhead.
6.1.01 to 6.4.02 inclusive, post-secondary education.
6.1.01 to 6.4.02 inclusive post-secondary education. Member for Topsail Paradise.
Thank you. Let's see if we can get this done in 11 minutes. Take it home.
Listen now, no brotherly
I'm just
scraps
looking
over
at
here.
6.2.02, 10, grants and subsidies. We see a huge drop, a cut from 15 million to 2.4 million. Can we explain that?
Oh, that's the reallocation of the campus renewal fee is offset by funding from, at the conclusion of the Canada Games infrastructure funding. Sorry?
Okay. Thank you. Just moving along here. I'm looking at 6.3.02. And physical plant and equipment. I'm just wondering, what deferred maintenance does the college have? Or do they have deferred maintenance?
Some of the CNA campuses are encompassed in the Department of TI, so I have to defer you to our colleagues in TI.
Yeah, moving over there. Thank you. Just moving along. I'm looking at 6.4.01. And again, I'm looking at grants and subsidies. And I see a $5 million drop previously for 24-25, and now it's back up to 14.7. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so there were savings as a result of the federal budget changes and not materializing, and there was a lower than expected uptake on our tuition relief grant program. But this year, the additional funding is based on anticipated federal budget changes and looking for the additional support.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm looking at 6.4.02, loans, advances, investments. We see a forecast growth there from the revised of about 6.4 million. What do we base that on?
Yeah, I'll defer to the ADM of Corporate Services.
ADM Hayes?
Robin Hayes, ADM of Corporate Services. So it would be similar to the grants up in the current section. The budget was put back up based on what we anticipate the federal budget changes to be. And they did not materialize in 24-25.
Okay, perfect. I'm good.
Member for St. John Center?
1.01, will there be a new adult literacy action plan released soon?
Turn to the ADM of Post-Secondary.
ADM Noseworthy?
ADM Post-Secondary Education, Tanya Noseworthy. What we've actually done is incorporated considerations for the adult literacy component into the education accord instead of doing a separate plan. So you'll see components in there related to that.
Thank you very much. And 6.4.01 and 6.4.02, how many students are currently receiving financial assistance, and how many of them are currently repaying student loans?
I will put out there that anybody who has a Newfoundland and Labrador student loan who completes their program on time in the allotted time allotment is eligible for loan forgiveness. So I don't think that that's talked about enough. So please do go tell all your constituents about that piece of work. But in terms of the specific numbers, I'll turn to the ADM responsible for post-secondary.
ADM Noseworthy?
ADM Post-Secondary, Tanya Noseworthy. So the number of students who are receiving student financial assistance that are in study for 24-25 is 8,423.
Excellent. And how many are currently repaying loans?
So it would be that number for the number that are currently in study, and then the number that are into repayment. And I may not have that number here.
And is there any indication of the total amount that's owed or outstanding student debt?
So the total amount owed?
Yeah.
I have that. So the total amount of the value of loans for students who are still currently studying is 22.3 million. And the total amount, that's for the NL portion. For the federal portion, it's 148 million. And students who are just in repayment that are not in study right now, the NL component is 17.3 million, and the federal component is 213.9 million.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. I ask the clerk to recall the subhead.
6.1.01 to 6.4.02 inclusive post-secondary education.
Shall 6.1.01 to 6.4.02 inclusive post-secondary education carry? All those in favor? All those against? Carried. I ask the clerk to call the next subhead.
7.1.01 education transformation.
7.1.01 education transformation. Member for Topsail Paradise.
I have no questions.
The member for Topsail Paradise has no questions. The member for St. John's Centre has no questions. I ask the clerk to call the total. No, to recall the subhead.
7.1.01, education transformation.
Shall 7.1.01, education transformation, carry? All those in favor? All those against? Carried.
Total.
Shall the total carry? All those in favor? All those against? Carried. Shall I report the estimates of the Department of Education? All those in favor? All those against? Carried. Report the estimates of the Department of Education have been reported. I'd like to thank the Minister, the departmental staff, and the committee for attending. And the next meeting is Monday, April 14th at 6 p.m. to consider the estimates of health and community services. I'll ask for a mover for adjournment. The member for Topsail Paradise. All those in favor? All those against? Carried. The meeting is adjourned.